Chapter 795. The Empress Dowager's face was bewildered, and she couldn't help but grip the armrest of her chair tightly. You're saying that the Prince Zhongshuan's food box was knocked over, and Snowball ate it and was poisoned to death? Concubine, are you telling the truth? If you dare to lie to me, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Empress Dowager, I don't dare. I'm telling the truth. The Prince Zhongshuan poisoned my beloved dog, then turned around and ran away, and the guards chased after her. At this time, Li Helan, Concubine E, and Princess Tana all came back to their senses. Li Helan looked at the Empress Dowager in astonishment. Mother, the Qin clan's bird's nest, wasn't it you who gave it to the eldest prince? How? Princess Tana said, she poisoned it. Ah! Concubine Yu exclaimed, falling to the ground, and said in horror, how could this be? So, the Qin clan wanted to poison the eldest prince, but was accidentally discovered by me, and Snowball ate the bird's nest that should have been given to the eldest prince by mistake? When this was said, the room was silent. Plotting to murder an imperial heir, everyone knew what kind of crime it was. The Qin Yining must have gone crazy to take advantage of this opportunity to make a move. Concubine E kept twisting the handkerchief in her hand, her face pale. Li Helan anxiously said, Mother, why aren't you arresting that slut? She actually dared to poison Hao Ji. She wants to rebel. The Empress Dowager murmured, if I didn't meet you halfway, wouldn't my eldest grandson have been harmed? Slapping the table, the Empress Dowager angrily stood up, gnashing her teeth. Arrest the Qin clan for me. Princess Tana said, Empress Dowager, you must severely punish that poisonous woman. It must be because you made her perform etiquette, and she held a grudge, so she took the opportunity to poison the bird's nest. It must be so. Concubine, he also said, I didn't expect her to be so daring to poison an imperial heir. She deserves to be punished. Princess Tana said, that's true. Isn't it strange for a woman to do this? Is there someone who instigated you? The accusation was directed at Pang Xiao. Li Helan's heart skipped a beat. In the end, he still sided with Pang Xiao and said, maybe she wants to take revenge on Imperial Mother. She hasn't gone out these days. How could she be ordered? Princess Tana didn't know the history between Li Helan and Pang Xiao in the past. She just thought it was Li Helan's own opinion. She wanted to refute it, but because Empress Dowager was present, she couldn't argue with Empress Dowager's daughter. So, she just said, what's going on? We will know after investigating. While they were talking, the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside. A guard dashed over to reply to the middle-ranking official outside the warm room. When the officer heard this, he immediately came in and saluted. Reporting to the Empress Dowager, the Imperial Bodyguard commander has already brought the criminal. Bring her in. The Empress Dowager coldly rebuked. Because the Empress Dowager said, bring her in, Qin Yining was really brought in by the Imperial Bodyguard commander. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. The Empress Dowager sat on the main seat and said with a sullen face, what's going on? The Imperial Bodyguard commander cupped his hands and said, reporting to the Empress Dowager, when I was patrolling the Imperial Garden, I heard someone shouting that there was an assassin. I rushed over and arrested the Prince Zhongshuan, who was running away. The Empress Dowager waved her hand. The Imperial Bodyguard commander nodded and retreated outside the door. The Empress Dowager lowered her eyes and stared coldly at Qin Yining. Qin clan, why do you want to murder the imperial heir? Tell me, who instigated you? Qin Yining struggled to get up, but there were two eunuchs from Sine Palace standing on either side of her. When they saw that she wanted to get up, they immediately went forward and pushed her hard. One of the eunuchs kicked Qin Yining's knee, causing Qin Yining, who was just about to stand up, to kneel down again. Qin Yining groaned and felt a sharp pain in her legs. She also knew that she was alone and couldn't gain the upper hand, so she simply sat on the ground and cast a sidelong glance at the Empress Dowager. Reporting to the Empress Dowager, I didn't poison it. The bird's nest was brought out from the small kitchen in the Empress Dowager's palace. It wasn't made by myself. How many people have done it? If you say it's poisoned, shouldn't you investigate from the source? Moreover, I haven't been charged with any crime, and you've already pinned such a big accusation on me. The Imperial Court has a 3-court joint trial for criminals, and there's also time to find evidence. How can you convict me of a crime with just a few words? Isn't the Empress Dowager afraid that the world will laugh at you if this spreads? You. The Empress Dowager grabbed the teacup and fiercely threw it at Qin Yining. The broken pieces of porcelain fell in front of Qin Yining, and the flying pieces scraped the back of her hand. How dare you? You actually dare to talk back to me in public. Someone come, fiercely slap her mouth for me. Yes. An elderly mama behind the Empress Dowager immediately rolled up her sleeves and walked to the front. She raised her hand and fiercely slapped Qin Yining. Qin Yining's face was slapped to one side. The corner of her mouth immediately split open, and a trace of blood flowed down. Qin Yining wanted to resist, but this was the imperial palace, and she was surrounded by the Empress Dowager's people. If she resisted, she would only receive more severe abuse. She had no other choice but to endure. The mama used both hands and slapped Qin Yining 4 or 5 times in a row. The loud slaps echoed in the warm room. Qin Yining's cheeks quickly became red and swollen. The blood at the corner of her mouth dripped onto her lapel, and several beautiful red plum blossoms bloomed. The Empress Dowager raised her hand, and the mama stopped and stood to the side. The Empress Dowager said again, "Speak. Why did you try to harm the imperial heir? Could it be that your husband's family wants to rebel? Does the Empress Dowager plan to beat me into a confession?" Qin Yining's words were no longer fluent, but she still argued for what was right. First, this subject has no reason or motive to poison the imperial heir. This subject doesn't need to fight for favor in the imperial harem or plan a future for my child. Why would this subject do such a thing? Second, the bird's nest was sent from the Empress Dowager's CI and palace. From the palace servant who made the bird's nest to the palace servant who sent it on the road. How many hands did it pass through? Why didn't the Empress Dowager investigate? Instead, she indiscriminately insisted that this subject did it. Third, concubine, you purposely bumped into this subject in the imperial garden, causing the bird's nest to fall to the ground. She said that the pug she raised died from eating the bird's nest, but who can be sure that the pug didn't eat other poisonous things before? Among the common people, if there are discrepancies in a case, they still have to investigate. There are also coroners who can examine it. Why is it that when it comes to the Empress Dowager, she doesn't ask for evidence or reason and only uses this subject to condemn me? She even wants to implicate this subject's family. The Empress Dowager is doing this. Isn't she afraid that the meritorious officials and the families of the nobles who founded the country will be disappointed? Qin Yining's words were reasonable and well-founded. In fact, everyone knew that this matter should be handled this way. The Empress Dowager's insistence that this was Qin Yining's doing without investigation was already very strange. But who was the Empress Dowager? She was your Majesty's birth mother and the master of the imperial harem. What she did might not represent your Majesty's wishes. Who would have the guts to say anything at this time? Moreover, if it was an ordinary noble, it would be fine. However, Pang Xiao was His Majesty's sworn brother. If they wanted to interrogate Qin Yining, they would have to go through the imperial clan court. At the very least, there would be a joint trial by the 3 courts. However, the Empress Dowager directly convicted him. Seeing that the Empress Dowager was rendered speechless by Qin Yining, Li Helan immediately slammed the table and stood up. He pointed at Qin Yining and cursed. "Bitch! I knew you were a black-hearted bitch with blue guts. You murdered a prince, yet you still dare to speak with justice? Could it be that you want to use your silver tongue to clear your name? Let me tell you, you're dreaming." Li Helan turned to the Empress Dowager and said, "Imperial Mother, don't listen to her nonsense. Directly lock her up. As long as she doesn't confess, don't give her water or food. I don't believe that she won't tell the truth." Hearing this, the Empress Dowager nodded and ordered, "This matter involves the imperial heir. This is a serious matter. This Empress Dowager cannot let the person who harmed the imperial heir go unpunished." Guards. Yes. The imperial bodyguards cupped their hands. Lock up Qin clan for this Empress Dowager. Isn't there a side hall behind Sand Palace? Lock her up there. Imperial Mother, you're too merciful, Li Helan said with dissatisfaction. This kind of criminal should be locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Why are you still keeping her in Xi'an Palace? The Empress Dowager said in a low voice. After all, she is Prince Zhongshuan's official wife. Although she is guilty, Prince Zhongshuan has wholeheartedly guarded the south for the country. She shouldn't insult Prince Zhongshuan's status. Lock her up. This Empress Dowager will make a decision after asking your majesty. Yes. The imperial bodyguards immediately stepped forward, grabbed Qin Yining's arms, and dragged her out. Right at this moment, a middle-ranking official loudly announced outside the warm room, "The Empress has arrived." As soon as the voice fell, the Empress, who was wearing a red dress with narrow sleeves, quickly walked in. When she saw Qin Yining's long hair disheveled and her cheeks red and swollen, she immediately reprimanded, "All of you stop." The imperial bodyguards hesitated, but in the end they stopped. The Empress gave Qin Yining a deep look, then quickly walked into the warm room. She curtsied to the Empress Dowager. "Empress Dowager, I don't know what wrong the Qin clan has done to deserve such punishment. This matter, Empress, the Qin clan poisoned the bird's nest that this Empress Dowager sent to Hao Ji, with the intention of harming the imperial heir. Don't tell me that as a mother, you no longer care about your own son's life and death and want to defend a criminal?" The Empress Dowager quickly interrupted the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was stunned, her face turning pale. She immediately shook her head and said, "Empress Dowager, the Qin clan isn't such a person. She even saved the eldest prince before. This Empress Dowager dares to guarantee that the Qin clan wouldn't poison an innocent child." "You guarantee?" "This Empress Dowager thinks that you're stupid." "What innocent child? The Qin clan clearly has the intention of rebelling." "Empress Dowager, please investigate. Have you investigated this matter? If you convict the Qin clan without investigating, how can a world be convinced? How dare you?" The Empress Dowager angrily shouted and pointed a finger at the Empress Dowager. "Very well. Empress Dowager, are you determined to side with outsiders? You're defending the Qin clan in every possible way. Don't you worry about the eldest prince at all? You're simply unqualified to be a mother like this. It seems that this Empress Dowager needs to raise Hao Ji by my side, so that he won't be harmed by ignorant people." The Empress Dowager's heart pounded. The Empress Dowager was threatening the Empress Dowager with her right to raise the prince. The Empress Dowager wanted to raise her own child herself, but her conscience wouldn't allow such a strange case to appear in front of her eyes. Chapter 796. The Empress Dowager never thought that at this time, the Empress would be the first person to stand up for the Qin Yining. This Empress usually didn't show off, but at this time, she was so eloquent, biting on the truth with every word. As a mother-in-law and the Empress Dowager, she was unexpectedly taken advantage of by her own daughter-in-law. How could she establish herself in the palace in the future? The Empress Dowager coldly said, "Empress, are you obsessed? You really don't care about your own prince? Could it be that you colluded with the Qin clan to harm the imperial heir?" The Empress's face changed dramatically. "Empress Dowager, what's the reason for accusing people so casually? Although this concubine is a junior, your majesty gave Feng Yin to this concubine, so this concubine must act impartially. At most, the Qin clan can only be regarded as a suspect, but the Empress Dowager directly insisted that the Qin clan is guilty. By doing this, you're likely to let the real murderer go unpunished. In this way, a good person will be wronged, and the person who really wants to harm the imperial heir will live freely, and may even harm the prince in the future. This concubine is the birth mother of the first prince. How can I allow such a situation to happen?" The Empress Dowager was once again choked by the Empress Dowager. When Li Helan saw this, she sneered, "Imperial sister-in-law is so powerful, you dare to yell at imperial mother like this. For a criminal who murdered the first prince, you actually speak so harshly. Could it be that imperial sister-in-law received some benefits from the in-laws?" The Empress was angered by Li Helan. "Your Highness, Princess Royal, be careful with your words. I think imperial sister-in-law should be careful with her words. Imperial mother is your mother-in-law. You don't listen to her orders, and you refute it like this. You wholeheartedly side with outsiders. You are unfilial to Imperial Mother, and you don't protect your son. Is Imperial sister-in-law qualified to be the mother of the nation? Whether I am qualified or not is not determined by Princess Royal's words. The Empress and Li Healan quarreled. The Empress Dowager simply waved her hand to the servants. The Empress has been bewitched. Take the Empress to the side and lock up the Qin clan. Yes. The servants of Sai and Palace immediately stepped forward and took the Empress to the side. The Imperial bodyguards lifted the Qin Ening up and dragged him out. Qin Ening's leg was injured, so it was impossible for her to catch up with the Imperial bodyguard. Moreover, the Imperial bodyguard was holding her from a height so that her feet could not touch the ground. After a few steps, her shoes fell off. Soon, the skin on her feet was scraped by the sharp stones, and her white socks were stained with blood. The Empress struggled anxiously and said sternly, "The Empress Dowager is acting like this. If it's too unfair, it'll only make a fool of itself. How dare you? I think you've had enough of being the Empress. Otherwise, Aijiao will ask the Emperor to divorce you." The Empress' eyes were red. She forcefully shook off the hands of the two eunuchs who were grabbing her and turned to leave. "Stop. Stop right there." However, the Empress turned a deaf ear to it and continued to walk quickly without looking back. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her face turned red. She kept muttering, "How dare you? How dare you? Imperial Mother, don't be angry. Sister-in-law has been possessed. You can teach her slowly in the future. How do you plan to deal with the Qin clan?" The Empress Dowager said irritably, "Don't worry about this matter. Aijia is here anyway. If she wants to harm Aijia's grandson, she's courting death." After saying this, the Empress Dowager strode out. Imperial concubine Yun and Princess Tana both stood up and saluted. "Farewell, Empress Dowager." Li Healan didn't have any fun in front of the Imperial concubines. He had seen enough of the show, so he didn't stay any longer and left the palace first. Imperial concubine Yun and Princess Tana didn't like each other, so they also left. Princess Tana saw that Qin Ening was unlucky today, so she was very happy in her heart. She finally did what Su asked her to do that day. She also helped the Khan of Inari vent his anger. Therefore, Princess Tana was in a very good mood along the way. However, when she returned to Chushio Palace, she took a look at the side hall where Qin Ening lived and remembered something. That's not right. Didn't the Qin clan have two maidservants? Just now, the guards only brought back the Qin clan. Where are the two maidservants? Princess Tana felt that this matter was very strange. She wanted to curry favor with the Empress Dowager, so she immediately took people to Xian Palace. At this time, in the inner hall of Xian Palace, the Empress Dowager and Imperial concubine Yun were sitting and talking. The handkerchief in Imperial concubine Yun's hand was twisted into a fried dough twist. She nervously whispered, "Aunt, this matter is too strange. Why did Imperial concubine Yun suddenly appear? There won't be any changes, right? What are you afraid of?" The Empress Dowager faintly smiled and took a sip of the tea. "As long as you do as Aijia says, there won't be any problems." Imperial concubine Yun's eyes flashed, and she hurriedly expressed her loyalty. "Qin Xie did as you said. I used the arsenic you gave me, and I also... You're courting death." Imperial concubine Yun covered her mouth and didn't dare to say anything else. The Empress Dowager said in a low voice, "Our original plan was to test the bird's nest for poison before giving it to the eldest prince. As long as it was tested to be poisonous, the people of Cunning Palace would immediately take down the Qin clan. This conflict would be between the Empress and the Qin clan. But Imperial concubine Yun suddenly appeared today. Although it disrupted our plan, we still achieved our goal, so it doesn't matter." "Yes." Imperial concubine Yun respectfully bowed, but there was an unconcealable sense of loss in her eyes. The Empress Dowager glanced at Imperial concubine Yun. "What? Do you still lack something?" No. Imperial concubine Yun hurriedly waved her hand. "Qin Xie just saw that things were different from what I expected, so I was a bit flustered. I don't have any other thoughts." The Empress Dowager sneered. I know you don't have the guts. All right, Ijia is also tired. You can go. Yes. Imperial concubine Yin stood up, curtsied, and respectfully retreated. The Empress Dowager leisurely played with the teacup. Looking at the lifelike carp playing with the lotus flower on the teacup, she suddenly chuckled. Don't think she couldn't see what Imperial concubine Yin was disappointed about. Did Imperial concubine Yin really hope that the eldest prince would be able to eat the bird's nest with arsenic? If she didn't mention that Imperial concubine Yin had brought a dead dog that had eaten arsenic to knock over the bird's nest, if her precious grandson really ate it, wouldn't the emperor fall out with her? The Empress Dowager leisurely leaned back and comfortably hummed a little tune. A mama came in from outside. Empress Dowager, Imperial concubine Shun requests an audience. The Empress Dowager frowned. Just say that Ijia is asleep. I won't see her. When Amama heard this, she complied and went to see Princess Tana. Replying to Imperial concubine Shun, the Empress Dowager was too frightened and angry today. She is extremely tired and has already fallen asleep. If you have any instructions, just tell this servant, and this servant will convey it for you. Princess Tana was so angry, she almost cursed. She had just seen Imperial concubine Yin come out of Cyan Palace. How could the Empress Dowager fall asleep in the blink of an eye? If the Empress Dowager didn't want to see her, then she didn't want to see her. What was the big deal? It made it seem like she was trying to curry favor. Princess Tana suppressed her anger and said, It's like this. This princess discovered that 2 of the Qin clan's servant girls were missing. When the Imperial guards went to capture them, they weren't seen. This princess came to inform the Empress Dowager. Since the Empress Dowager has already fallen asleep, this princess will take her leave. After curtsying, Princess Tana didn't look at the mama's expression and quickly returned to Chusho Palace. The mama's expression changed greatly, and she quickly went back to inform the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager heard this, she immediately sat up. A group of idiots. Even 2 little girls were left behind. Why aren't you letting them go find them? Yes. The mama quickly went to instruct the Imperial guards to capture Ji Yun and Bing Tang. As for Qin Yining, he was already shackled to his ankles with an iron chain. The other end was locked to a pillar in the dark room. The windows on all 4 sides of the dark room had been nailed shut with wooden planks. Only the gaps between the planks let in a faint light, reflecting the floating dust in the empty room. The inside of the room was very clean. There weren't any tables, chairs, benches, or furniture. There was a large Kong bed by the window. Obviously, no one would light a fire. There was a wash basin in the corner. Other than that, there was nothing else. She didn't expect there to be such a place behind the Empress Dowager's Cyan Palace. Qin Yining dragged the heavy chain and walked a few steps. The room was dark and moldy, and she could faintly smell blood. She didn't know how many palace servants the Empress Dowager had executed in this room for mistakes. She originally thought that someone of the Empress Dowager's status wouldn't stain her hands with blood. Now, it seemed that she had overestimated her. Qin Yining walked the length of the chain and tried to sit on the Kong bed. However, she found that because the Kong bed was close to the window, it leaked air everywhere. It was even colder than the floor. She then returned to the red-painted pillar. She wrapped her arms around herself, hugged her knees, and sat down. She curled herself into a ball. It's all right, Qin Yining said to herself. The echo of her voice could be heard in the empty hall. It's all right. It's all right. Just hold on a little longer. Her own voice still echoed in the hall. Qin Yining pressed her red and swollen cheek against her sleeve. A drop of hot tear flowed out from the corner of her eye. It was quickly sucked dry by her sleeve. She couldn't be weak. She couldn't be afraid, because Qin Yining understood that this was only the beginning. Being locked up in CI and Palace was even more terrifying than being locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Here, the Empress Dowager could torture her if she wanted to. She believed that the methods of the old mamas by the Empress Dowager's side would be very powerful. Qin Yining closed her eyes and forced herself to conserve energy. Things have already gotten to this point. She must be strong. She still has 2 children, Pang Xiao and her parents. She must hold on. Qin Yining judged the sunrise and sunset from the light coming through the cracks in the window. In the blink of an eye, day and night had passed. She hugged her knees and sat on the spot, curling up to keep herself warm. Her empty stomach was in pain, and her lips were cracked from thirst. The bruises on her knees were swollen, and the pain was excruciating. She touched her face, and it seemed to be even more swollen. Qin Yining silently drew the first stroke of the Zheng character on the corner of the wall. She laughed at herself. She wanted to see how long this barbarian could hold on. Such a big thing had happened in the palace. Although Li Qitian did not deliberately spread the news, he did not suppress the news either. Very quickly, the court officials and nobles knew that the Prince Zhongshuan's consort wanted to harm the imperial heir. In the eldest princess's palace, Li Helan had just changed into a new magenta spring dress when a servant girl excitedly came to report. Eldest princess, the prince consort is here. Li Helan's face lit up when she heard this. She hurriedly looked at her hair ornaments in the mirror. After confirming that her appearance was impeccable, she stood up with a smile. Jiziyu was wearing a black cross-sleeve shirt. His black hair was tied up high behind his head and draped over his straight back. His jade-like face was expressionless, and his handsome face was as cold as ice. Chapter 797. Jiziyu was dressed in a black shirt with cross-collar sleeves. His ink-black hair was tied up high behind his head and draped over his straight back. His jade-like face was expressionless, and his handsome face was as cold as ice. Li Helan looked at Jiziyu, and her heart throbbed. She teased in a sweet voice. "Why is Prince Consort here? Could it be that you missed this consort?" She stepped forward to take Jiziyu's arm. Jiziyu raised his arm to avoid Li Helan and sat down on the rose chair next to the window. He said in a deep voice, "When the incident happened in the palace, were you with the Empress Dowager?" Li Helan's hand froze in midair and her face darkened. "What? Did Prince Consort come here because of this?" Jiziyu said, "What else could it be? You." Li Helan gritted her teeth. "Jilan, don't forget your status. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Do you think you're the only man in the world? This consort is the eldest princess, and there are many men who flock to this consort. You're the only one who's angry at the sight of this consort. What do you want this consort to do? Doesn't the eldest princess get to do whatever she wants?" Li Helan's face was ashen. "You still hate me. If you don't like it, I'll just dismiss those people. You don't have to give me face all the time. There's no need to force yourself. You can be with whichever man you like." Jiziyu's expression was indifferent. "I don't wear broken shoes. You, how dare you?" Jiziyu ignored her. He lowered his eyes and played with the horsewhip in his hand. He said casually, "What happened in the palace that day? If you're willing to tell me, then tell me. If you don't, then I'll take my leave." "What kind of attitude is this?" Jiziyu looked at Li Helan and simply stood up to leave. "Stop." Li Helan was so angry that she stomped her feet. She strode forward and reached out to grab Jiziyu's sleeve. If Jiziyu didn't want to, who could touch his clothes? Li Helan's hand missed again. "Princess Royal is willing to tell me?" Zayu glanced sideways. Li Helan gnashed her teeth in anger and said, "You came to ask me about something, yet your attitude is so negligent. Do you think I have to tell you?" The corners of Jiziyu's lips twitched as he stepped forward again. Looking at his handsome back, Li Helan simply loved and hated him. They were husband and wife after all. No matter how many gigolos she had, she still had to bear children with this man. Besides, which one of her gigolos was as handsome as Jiziyu? Moreover, his aura could only be possessed by someone who had been honed on the battlefield. "Stop right there. Am I supposed to ask you to tell me?" Jiziyu stopped and turned around to look at Li Helan. Then he walked back into the room and sat down on the rose robe. He didn't say a word as he waited for Li Helan to speak. Li Helan's face was dark. She didn't want to give up the chance to interact with Jiziyu, so she could only tell him what had happened in the palace. Jiziyu had been playing with the whip with his eyes down. It was as if he didn't take Li Helan's words to heart. After Li Helan finished speaking, Jiziyu said, "She was locked up without any investigation? It was clearly her. Would Imperial Mother wrongly accuse her?" Jizu gave a mocking smile and said, "She was locked up by the Empress Dowager." Li Helan looked at Jizu's expression and felt an indescribable anger in her heart. She said with dissatisfaction, "What? Why does husband care about that cheap woman? Whether she lives or dies, what does it have to do with you?" Jizu didn't reply. This time, he got up and walked away. Li Helan couldn't catch up to him even if she wanted to. "Come back. Jilan, come back here." Jizu didn't even look back, but he quickly walked away. Li Helan clenched her fists. Her back was tense, and her shoulders were tense. She gritted her teeth as she looked in the direction Jizu left. Her eyes gradually turned red. This was her husband-in-law. He spoke to her with such an attitude. She knew that Jizu cared about her gigolos. However, Jizu was so cold to her and didn't give her any face. She was the eldest princess. Could it be that she couldn't find her own happiness? Jizu had wronged her like this, so why should she endure it? Jizu quickly left the eldest princess residence. The attendant beside him watched the entire process and said in a low voice with worry, "Duke, will the eldest princess hold a grudge? What if she goes to your majesty to complain? Wouldn't that be bad?" Jizu didn't care at all. He gave a cold laugh and said, "Let her do as she pleases." The attendant knew the inside story and naturally didn't like Li Helan's fickle character. Moreover, Jizu was such an outstanding and proud person. Therefore, the attendant didn't try to persuade him anymore. Jizu flipped onto his horse. White Cloud, whose fur was silvery white like silk, intimately galloped a few steps forward. Jizu gently stroked White Cloud's soft mane. He lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before urging his horse to quickly leave the eldest princess residence. In a dark room in the back hall of Xian Palace, Qin Yining hugged her arms and fell into a deep sleep. It had been 2 days, and the Empress Dowager had only sent someone to send her a bowl of porridge. She was so hungry that her vision was blurred and it was cold in the hall. She didn't have any strength in her body, and she was so cold that she didn't want to move. Her head was so heavy that she just wanted to sleep. At this time, she heard the sound of chains moving outside the door. After the sound of the door opening, a small attendant who looked to be around 12 or 13 years old poked his head inside. Qin Yining narrowed her eyes to look at him. She knew that he was the attendant who had been responsible for sending her food these past few days. The little attendant looked around the room and quickly walked out. Not long after, he came back. Seeing the bedding in his hands, Qin Yining was a bit surprised. After the little attendant came in, he did not say anything to Qin Yining. He first went to put the bedding on the heated Kong by the window and then quickly ran out. He struggled to bring in a basket of charcoal and lit a charcoal brazier. He then placed a brass kettle on the brazier and boiled some water. After doing all of this, he finally brought in a basket from outside. There were 4 or 5 white steam buns in the basket. Qin Yining looked at all of this in confusion. Seeing that the little attendant was about to leave after putting down the things, Qin Yining quickly asked, "Gong Gong, please wait. What are these?" The little attendant stopped and obediently said, "I don't dare be called Gong Gong by the princess. This servant is just following the Empress Dowager's orders." Qin Yining was even more surprised. How did the Empress Dowager think it through? With the Empress Dowager's personality, she would torture her as much as she wanted before killing her. But she had waited for 2 days, and not only had no one come to torture her, they had even brought in the bedding and charcoal brazier. Why would the Empress Dowager give such orders? This servant doesn't know. The little attendant lowered his head and said this as if Qin Yining was a scourge. He acted spoiled and ran away. Qin Yining was very puzzled. She stood and dragged the heavy chains to the edge of the Kong. She took down the bedding and placed it in a place away from the wind and next to the charcoal brazier. Who knew that a small blue package would fall out of the bedding? Qin Yining quickly put down the things and picked up the package. Inside the package was a small porcelain box and a note. The handwriting on the note was unfamiliar. It was drawn horizontally and the handwriting was hard and thin. With one look, she knew that the owner of the handwriting was arrogant and cold. The content of the note was very simple. Other than saying that the porcelain box contained the cream for blood circulation and blood stasis, there were only 4 simple words. Endure and wait. Qin Yining looked over the note in confusion. The ink and paper used were the most common, and she could not find any flaws. She could not think of anyone who had the ability to make the Empress Dowager order someone to send her something and even send the cream inside. But this way, she could live a bit more comfortably. Qin Yining put the note into the burning charcoal brazier. She watched as the note was licked by the flames and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Only then did she feel at ease. She wrapped the blanket around her and sat next to the charcoal brazier to warm herself while applying the medicine. Chapter 798. You came from the Empress Dowager? Li Qitian rubbed the space between his eyebrows. His eyes were slightly dark. It was obvious that he hadn't slept well in the past 2 days. Jiziyu cupped his hands and answered, yes. How rare. Li Qitian closed his eyes and continued to rub the space between his eyebrows. The jade ring on his thumb glowed with a fluorescent green light. But what nonsense did Lan do again? Jiziyu said bluntly. This subject went there because of the Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Oh. Li Qitian's hand paused, and he abruptly opened his eyes. At first, he was surprised that Jiziyu would be so blunt. Jiziyu said this subject was afraid that the Empress Dowager would starve her to death. If she was tortured to death before the case was closed, it would damage the imperial family's reputation. Li Qitian heard this and couldn't help but laugh. It's rare for you to be so honest. You're right. Even if the Qin clan murdered the imperial heir, it's better to not starve her to death before she's hanged, so as to avoid rumors. You've done well. Jiziyu said, I don't dare to accept it. As if he didn't care about this matter at all, he brought up another matter. Although this subject is doing well in the capital is peaceful and peaceful. This subject isn't used to living here and would like to ask the imperial edict to guard the northern border in case the Taytan spies in the dark and invades the border again. AI, you clearly don't know how to enjoy life. Li Qitian smiled and waved his hand. He stood up and paced around the desk with his hands behind his back. He walked to Jiziyu's side and patted him on the shoulder. This subject has seen you go on campaigns all year round and spend all your time with those uncouth soldiers in the army. It's getting more and more boring. Let's not talk about other things. Look at Pang Jishi. She has a son now. Look at this subject. After so many years of campaigning, I also have a legitimate son. You should think about the important things in your life. Li Qitian blinked a few times, then smiled and said, Oh, this emperor also knows that Lan has gone too far. But you ought to have a legitimate son. As long as you have a legitimate son, we will not interfere with how many concubines and maids you want to have. We will also control Lan. In Beiji, the emperor's son-in-law or the guest of honor were not allowed to take concubines, but he allowed Jiziyu to take concubines. The only condition was that she had to give birth to a legitimate son with Li Helan. This was already an extra favor from him. Jiziyu naturally understood what Li Qitian meant. He smiled and said, This subject obeys. Li Qitian patted Jiziyu's shoulder again with satisfaction. We also know that you have been wronged. However, he was a man. Establishing his career was the most important thing. He couldn't put all his thoughts on love. How many women could be relied on? For example, Pang Jishi. Look at him. If it weren't for the scourge of the Qin clan, Pang Jishi wouldn't have made so many mistakes. Li Qitian's voice was full of ridicule. Pang Jishi disobeyed the imperial edict because of her. He also secretly trained his soldiers because of her. We think that this woman should be eliminated as soon as possible to prevent Pang Jishi from making more mistakes. Jiziyu said expressionlessly, Your Majesty can make the decision. However, the fingers hidden in his sleeves couldn't help but twirl. Li Qitian glanced at Jiziyu and smiled with satisfaction. He turned and said solemnly, As for the Qin clan's intention to harm the imperial heir, it is truly difficult for us to deal with. Although she has committed such evil deeds, Pang Jishi is still our sworn brother. We still have the friendship of conquering the world together. If we don't deal with this matter properly, we are afraid that it will affect our brotherly relationship and cause others to gossip about us. Jiziyu's heart turned cold when he heard this. Your Majesty doesn't intend to investigate at all and has already convicted them. It seems that the Qin clan will definitely be eliminated. He lowered his head and said, Your Majesty's intention is, we intend to invite the nobles and their families who fought with us to be present as witnesses. After all, we fought for the world together. Pang Zhishi is not an outsider. Since his wife has committed such a crime, we can't bear to hand the Qin clan over to the Imperial Clan Court or the Three Divisions. We want to deal with them personally in front of our own people. It can also be considered an explanation to Pang Zhishi. Jiziyu lowered his head and smiled. However, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Your Majesty is wise. Huh? Li Qiqian laughed heartily. We knew that you would understand our difficulties. Jiziyu remained silent and didn't say a word. However, Li Qiqian knew Jiziyu's temperament. He knew that he wasn't someone like Pang Xiao, who was used to talking nonsense. Although this kind of person was indifferent, he was more reliable. Li Qiqian and Jiziyu exchanged a few more irrelevant words before sending him out. As soon as he left, the smile on Li Qiqian's face immediately faded. He unconsciously took off his thumb ring and put it back on. After repeating this several times, he said in a low voice, Someone come. In the blink of an eye, a black-clothed man hiding in the shadows jumped out. Your Majesty, go. Follow Duke Ding and see what he's doing. Yes. The black-clothed man cupped his hands and bowed. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the shadows. Li Qiqian sat back behind the imperial desk. He placed his hands on the table and murmured after a long time, Jilan. After Ji Ziyu left the palace, he immediately returned to Duke Ding's residence. He locked himself in his study and didn't go out for a long time. When the sky gradually darkened, he finally came back to his senses from a long period of contemplation. Coincidentally, his attendant gently knocked on the door. Duke, dinner is here. Hearing Jiziyu's permission, the attendant ordered people to bring in the food box and neatly placed it on the table. Jiziyu looked at the steaming hot food, but he couldn't find his appetite. Duke, you've been cooped up in your room for the entire afternoon. You haven't touched anything. You should eat something. Jiziyu still sat there with a grave expression and didn't say a word. The attendant advised, Duke, you've done your best. Please don't take it to heart. Jiziyu just shook his head. His handsome face seemed to be covered with frost. The Qin clan must die. The attendant was shocked. Duke, Jiziyu shook his head. He picked up the bowl and slowly ate, but he couldn't taste the food. He'd done his best, but there was nothing he could do. He didn't care about the Qin clan's life or death, but he could imagine how sad Pang Xiao would be and how crazy she would be doing. In this world, lovers were the ones who hurt the most. In comparison, it was the heartless person above who had an easier time. Percent at the same time, in Southern Yin Palace. Yuqi Shujia held a wine cup and smiled. That Prince Zhongshan might think too lowly of me. Although I've taken control of Southern Yin, I still haven't forgotten who the rightful Dayan Emperor is. He thought that after chasing you and driving you to Southern Yin, I would kill you for the sake of being the rightful emperor? As he spoke, Yuqi Shujia smiled and put his wine cup close to Yuqi Yan's with both hands and clinked cups with him. Your Majesty, let me toast you. Yuqi Yin smiled bitterly and shook his head. How am I still the emperor? Right now, you're the emperor of Southern Yin. I'm just a stray dog who was chased here by Pang Zhishi like an animal. The old capital has already been completely controlled by Pang Zhishi. I really don't have a place to stay. Yuqi Yin had lost a lot of weight. His cheeks were sunken, his chin was covered in stubble, and there were more white hairs on his temples. He looked like he had aged 10 years. Yuqi Shujia sighed. Your Majesty, don't worry. Even if we lose the old capital, it's fine. Sooner or later, we'll be able to recover the lost land and restore Dayan. As long as you nod, this subject will immediately give up the throne and willingly support the rightful emperor. I know of your loyalty. Yuqi Yin sighed emotionally and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. Yuqi Shujia also raised his head and drank the wine. He personally held the white porcelain pot and poured a cup for Yuqi Yin. The two of them toasted each other and shared some intimate words. They were no different from commoners. The pot of wine was quickly emptied. Yuchi Shujia and Yuchi Yan's faces were flushed from drinking. Yuchi Shujia stood up and wobbled as he ordered, "Come, come, bring the wine." Unexpectedly, the palace servants in the temporary imperial residence didn't respond. Not a single one of them came in. Yuchi Shujia blinked his blurry eyes and raised his voice again. "Come." Still, no one responded. Yuchi Shujia was displeased. He strode to the door to call for someone. Unexpectedly, after taking 2 steps, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. The pain was unprecedented. Yuchi Shujia simply couldn't bear it. When he lowered his head, he saw the tip of a knife in his chest. Blood was gushing out from the wound and staining his light yellow robe. Yuchi Shujia slowly turned his head in disbelief. Yuchi Yin panicked and loosened his blood-stained hands. The dagger was left on Yuchi Shujia's body. His eyes were particularly bright. In addition to fear, there was also a kind of bloodthirsty madness and resentment. You made a secret code with someone, didn't you? When the wine pot is empty, you want to refill it. The next moment, you want to call someone to kill me. Then, you can openly become the emperor of the Dian dynasty, right? You little villain. Yuchi Shujia spat out blood. He couldn't support himself anymore and fell into a pool of blood. Villain? Ha! Yuchi Yin looked at Yuchi Shujia's widened eyes and said with a sobbing tone, "Each and every one of you wants to harm me. I'm no longer the emperor. I have nothing left. But you still don't want to let me go. Old Minister Gu is right. You all deserve to die. You all deserve to die." Yuchi Yin wiped his trembling hands on his robe. He turned around and grabbed a cloak to put it on. He was about to leave through the back door of the side hall. Gu Shixiang had already arranged for people to support him outside. If he wanted to take back the throne, he had a plan for the long term. Just as Gu Shixiang said, Yuchi Shujia brought him into the palace alone to kill him. He had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. Yuchi Yan's mind was a mess. He didn't have a clue. The fear of being chased by the army finally exploded when he picked up the dagger. His footsteps became more and more disorderly. Just as he walked out the back door, Yuchi Yin suddenly heard a cry of alarm from inside the room. His Majesty was assassinated. When Yuchi Yin heard this, he immediately panicked. He walked down the stairs too quickly and almost tripped. He quickened his pace and walked quickly through the forest and the winding paths leading to the secluded temporary imperial residence. Fortunately, this temporary imperial residence was just a villa that the former imperial family used to live in. It didn't occupy a large area. It wasn't as tall as the Zhou's or Dian's imperial palaces. It didn't take him much effort to get out. He avoided people along the way. When the screams of His Majesty was assassinated, behind him became more and more chaotic. Yuchi Yin came out of the side door and saw Gu Shixiang and the others who came to support him. When he saw Yuchi Yin come out, Gu Shixiang hurriedly greeted him. "Wang Yi, how was it? Did you succeed?" Yes. Let's go." Yuchi Yin nodded frantically and hurriedly got into the carriage. Chapter 799. Yuchi Yin and Gu Shixiang were shaken to their core. They were very familiar with this voice. It was Pang Xiao. Suddenly, torches lit up all around them, like stars in the night sky. However, in the eyes of Yuchi Yin and Gu Shixiang, they only felt a chill in their hearts. They were already panicking. Pang Xiao brought a group of over 100 men and encircled the man in the middle. Beside Pang Xiao were 2 ministers of Southern Yin Kingdom. How is this possible? How can this be? Pang Xiao sighed and said apologetically, "I'm sorry. I was one step too slow." In the end, Jinan Wang still made his move. "Actually, this was not your Majesty's intention. It was completely due to Jinan Wang's selfishness." After saying this, Pang Xiao looked angrily at Yuchi Yin again. "Your Majesty made you Jinan Wang and treated you well. Are you still not satisfied? Why did you escape to this place and do such a heinous, heartless, and unjust thing?" The 2 Southern Yin ministers could not help but curse at this time. "You have already surrendered to the Zhou and become Jinan Wang. You have endless glory and wealth. Why did you come back to assassinate the Southern Yin Emperor? Could it be that you have no backbone to surrender to another country and yet you don't allow courageous and responsible people to continue the fire of the Dayan dynasty. A vile person like you is a disgrace to the bloodline of the Dayan imperial family. This old man has repeatedly advised His Majesty to get rid of the weeds by the roots. However, His Majesty abided by morality and insisted on honoring you as the legitimate heir. Now, there are capable and ambitious people who have been killed. What can a good-for-nothing like you do for the Dayan dynasty? The two ministers of the Southern Yin Kingdom pointed at Yu Yin, venting out all their anger. Pang Xiao brought his men and watched quietly, acting as if he did not want to participate in the internal affairs of the Southern Yin dynasty. Yu Yin and Gu Shixiang were protected in the middle by the remaining guards. They were scolded until their faces turned red. I didn't. Yu Yin looked at Gu Shixiang as if he wanted to get comfort from Gu Shixiang. I didn't. You were the one who said that Yuqi Shujie couldn't be trusted, especially when he only invited me to the banquet. I didn't expect that. Gu Shixiang was disappointed to see Yu Yin push the blame to him at the critical moment. However, it was not a good time to argue with the Yu Yin about this matter. Gu Shixiang winked at Yu Yin and pulled him into the carriage. Hurry up and leave. Let's go. Yu Yin's bodyguards also hurriedly mounted their horses and waved their swords in an attempt to break through. The coachman shook the reins and drove the carriage forward at a very fast speed, crashing and crashing all the way forward. The soldiers near the encirclement panicked and immediately fled in all directions, allowing the carriage to break out of the encirclement. Pang Xiao said anxiously, "Chase after them." Yes. The soldiers with torches in their hands ran like mad. However, with 2 legs chasing after 4 legs, they were still at a disadvantage in the end. Pang Xiao turned to appease the officials of the Southern Yin dynasty and discussed Yuqi Shujie's funeral and the future of the Southern Yin dynasty. Everything was going according to plan. In just one night, the news that the ruler of the fallen country, Yu Yin, assassinated Yuqi Shujie for a high position and a generous salary spread to everyone. This sinner who handed over the Dayan dynasty to others not only shamelessly became the Jinan Prince of Dezhou, but also turned around and killed the emperor of the Southern Yin dynasty. If he killed Yuqi Shujie for the sake of ascending to the throne, and then sat on the throne himself, he would also be called an ambitious and ruthless person. However, he fled to Dezhou after killing someone. It was obvious that he worked for the emperor of Dezhou. The people of the Southern Yin dynasty despised such a despicable person who forgot his ancestors. The officials of the Southern Yin dynasty were also very angry. But in the end, they had lost their backbone. Yu Yin had run away, and Yuqi Shujie was dead. There was no one decent enough to take over this mess in the imperial family of the Yin dynasty. They had no idea what to do. Percent in a dark room at the back of the CI and palace, Qin Yining used her long fingernails to draw the last stroke of the 4th character on the wall. She had been locked up here for 20 days. During this time, only the small eunuch came to deliver food once a day. The Empress Dowager seemed to have lost interest in her and never saw her again. She also didn't arrange for anyone to torture her. Qin Yining's injuries were almost healed. It was all thanks to the miraculous effect of the small box of ointment. However, she could only use water to wipe her face and hands every day without being able to bathe. She was in a very sorry state. Qin Yining didn't know what was going on outside and felt very uneasy. With the Empress Dowager's temper, she didn't even touch her. It was obvious that torturing her no longer interested the Empress Dowager. Or perhaps, with her current situation, she didn't deserve to be tortured by the Empress Dowager. While she was deep in thought, the sound of chains suddenly came from outside the hall. Qin Yining was a bit confused. The eunuch came once a day to deliver food. He had already delivered food today, so why was he here again? The double doors were completely opened, and the Empress Dowager's elderly servant walked in. She looked at Qin Yining, who was standing dignified and in a sorry state, and sneered, "Princess consort, please." Qin Yining frowned. "Where are we going?" "This is your Majesty's decree. Don't waste your breath." The elderly servant turned around and led the way. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly had a feeling that it's finally here. After walking out of the door, Qin Yining squinted her eyes uncomfortably. She used her hand to cover her eyes for a moment before her eyes adjusted to the light. Looking at the sky, it was already afternoon. The elderly servant impatiently urged, "Why aren't you leaving? Don't let your majesty wait too long." Qin Yining tidied her long hair and walked down the red steps. She expressionlessly followed behind the elderly servant all the way to the main hall of Sun Palace. The palace servant went in to report, and soon came back to lead Qin Yining in. Contrary to Qin Yining's expectations, the main hall of Xie and palace was exceptionally lively today. Li Qitian sat at the head of the table, followed by the Empress Dowager and then the Empress. There were 3 rows of seats on both sides. On one side, there were Consort Yi, Consort Shun, Consort Yu, Li Helan, and other high-ranking concubines, as well as the womenfolk of noble families. On the other side, there was Ji Ziyu, who had performed meritorious deeds. When Qin Yining entered, everyone looked at her. When Qin Yining saw this scene, her heart sank to the bottom, but she still maintained a calm expression. She respectfully bowed to the Emperor and Empress, then paid her respects to the Empress Dowager. Her etiquette was so thorough that no one could find fault with it. Li Qitian's expression was as calm as water. He looked down at Qin Yining, who was kneeling down, and didn't ask her to rise. Instead, he went straight to the point and said, "Today, we have summoned all of our beloved officials and their families to discuss the matter of Prince Zhongshuan's concubine plotting to murder the emperor's heir. The Qin clan disregarded the emperor's grace and attempted to murder our legitimate son. Their crimes are punishable by death. According to the rules, we should have handed them over to the imperial clan court or the 3 departments. However, Pang Zhishi is one of our trusted officials. He has performed meritorious deeds and is also our sworn brother. We cannot hand his wife over to outsiders to be interrogated. Thus, we have gathered all of you here today to be witnesses. We cannot deal with this matter in secret. We must give everyone a fair explanation." When everyone heard this, they all agreed, "Your Majesty is benevolent." Chapter 800. At this time, Qin Yining already understood that even if she argued, it would be useless. Everyone who understood the current situation would only observe the emperor's will and not care about the truth of the matter. Qin Yining's lips curved into a smile. Originally, she had been frightened into a cold sweat, but now she had completely calmed down. She didn't do anything wrong. She had a clear conscience. If she really lost her life today, there was nothing she could do about it. From the day she married Pang Xiao, she had already made a choice for her future. Even if she lost her life, she would have regrets, but she would not regret it. When Li Qitian saw that Qin Yining was tactfully silent, the rebuttal she had prepared was now useless. Her chest was choked with anger, and she felt inexplicably suffocated. She really was as difficult to deal with as Pang Zhishi. Who would have thought that the Qin clan would actually do such a thing? Finally, a clever noble lady spoke up, so that Li Qitian's words would not become awkward. Soon after, some people reacted and followed the emperor's will to condemn Qin Yining's numerous crimes. Qin Yining looked at them coldly. Among those who condemned her, there were several marquises' wives and Shizi's wives who used to be polite to her when they met. Although the men didn't gossip as much as the women, they all shook their heads and sighed. Those who called Pang Xiao brothers didn't come out to say anything either. The fickleness of the world was just like that. Li Qitian said, "Since that's the case, Zhan will reply to your majesty. Qinxia has something to say." Just as Li Qitian was about to issue an edict to punish Qin Yining, the empress suddenly stood up and bowed, interrupting Li Qitian's words. The Empress Dowager's hand, which had been counting the jade beads like a Mithriya Buddha, suddenly stopped and glared at the empress. Li Qitian's words were interrupted, and his heart was very unhappy. Ever since he stepped on the throne and became the emperor, it had been many years since he was interrupted before he could finish a sentence. However, with so many outsiders present, Li Qitian couldn't lose his temper. He could only say, "What does the empress want to say?" There was a layer of sweat on the emperor's palms. Li Qiqian was her husband. He was supposed to be the closest person to her for the rest of her life. Now that she was in front of him, she had to think twice before she dared to speak. It was the first time for the empress to interrupt Li Qiqian in public. She nervously swallowed a mouthful of saliva and bowed. "Your Majesty, I feel that there's something fishy about this matter. There's no evidence to prove that the Qin clan murdered the imperial heir. I don't believe it either." "Shut up." Li Qiqian's face was livid. She slammed her palm on the table so hard that the teacups on the table clinked. "Your house mother, how dare you speak for the murderer?" "Insufficient evidence. You're already being held by the wrist. What evidence do you still want?" The empress's face was pale after being reprimanded. She nervously twisted her sleeves. Concubine Yu understood the situation and stood up. Her beautiful face was filled with tears as she timidly said, "Your Majesty is right. This concubine saw her poisoning that day. If this concubine bumped into her halfway and let her fall into the poisonous bird's nest, I don't know what would have happened to His Highness." Concubine Yi also said, "Yes, although the Empress is kind and gentle, she also has to distinguish the occasion. Your Majesty is doing justice. Your Majesty is the noble son of heaven. How can you slander a woman from the Qin clan?" Yes, Princess Tana only hated that de Zhou's words were useless at the critical moment. She couldn't get a word in, so she could only add this sentence. Li Qiqian's face was as calm as water. He said in a deep voice, "I know that the Empress is kind on the surface, but soft-hearted. But it's really wrong to be soft-hearted when facing the criminal who murdered the imperial heir." The Empress gritted her teeth. She already had the intention to retreat. But this matter wasn't investigated at all. It was obvious that there was something fishy going on. She didn't want to wrongly accuse people, nor did she want to let the real culprit go unpunished. But Your Majesty insisted on it. The arm couldn't go against the thigh. I thank the Empress for speaking up for me. Qin Yining turned around on her knees and bowed to the Empress. The Empress shook her head. Her eyes flashed with guilt. She shook her head and took 2 steps back. She didn't dare to speak anymore. Li Qiqian let out a sigh of relief. Just as he made up his mind to speak, a familiar-looking eunuch suddenly trotted in. Looking carefully, he should be the eunuch who served in Chengqian Palace. "Reporting to Your Majesty." The eunuch bowed and leaned close to Li Qiqian's ear to whisper for a while. Li Qiqian's expression didn't change at all, but those who knew him well enough would find that his expression was gradually becoming numb. This was Li Qiqian's expression of suppressing his anger. The eunuch left after replying. Li Qiqian pursed his lips and looked expressionlessly at Qin Yining. It was as if he wanted to use his gaze to cut off a piece of flesh from her body. The Empress Dowager, Consort Yun, and the others didn't understand. The nobles and titled ladies also looked at each other in dismay. No one knew what had happened. Everyone was waiting for Your Majesty's order. The beautiful Prince Zhongshuan's head would be separated from her body. But Your Majesty still refused to speak. A suffocating silence spread through the hall. No one dared to breathe loudly. Qin Yining remained kneeling in place, calmly waiting for Li Qiqian's punishment. But as time passed, Li Qiqian still didn't say a word. It was as if he had turned into a statue. Qin Yining began to make all sorts of guesses. Something must have happened. After the time it took for 2 sticks of incense to burn, Li Qiqian slowly opened his mouth. "Qin clan, what explanation do you have for the assassination of the imperial heir?" Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The Empress Dowager was even more shocked and dumbfounded. No one could imagine why Li Qiqian, who originally didn't investigate the matter and only wanted to kill Qin Yining, would suddenly change his mind and give Qin Yining a chance to explain himself. Li Helan, who had been silent all this time, finally couldn't restrain her temper. She anxiously stood up and bowed. "Imperial brother, it's an indisputable fact that the Qin clan tried to assassinate the imperial heir. Imperial brother is benevolent, but you shouldn't condone the guilty and let them get away with it." Li Qiqian shook his head at Li Helan and gestured for her to leave. Li Helan frowned. Her face was filled with anger as she anxiously said, "Imperial brother, you can't leave." Li Qiqian's voice was gentle, but his aura was so overbearing that it scared Li Helan so much that she broke out in a cold sweat. The Empress Dowager saw that Li Qiqian was truly angry and had no intention of changing his mind, so she gave Li Helan a fierce look. Li Helan didn't know where she had gone wrong. She felt wronged, and tears welled up in her eyes. Imperial brother Gao Ming wasn't like this just a moment ago. Why did he suddenly change? Qin Yining bowed and said, "Your Majesty, this subject's wife has something to say." "Speak." "Yes." Qin Yining bowed and carefully recounted what had happened that day, including how the bird's nest had been made in the Empress Dowager's small kitchen, how the Empress Dowager had made things difficult for her, how concubine Yu had suddenly appeared when she had brought people to deliver the bird's nest, and how she had inexplicably blamed her. There are many suspicious points in this matter. The bird's nest was made in the Sai and Palace's small kitchen, and it had been delivered by the palace servants. There are many people who had handled it, so it should be investigated in detail. When this subject's wife was delivering the bird's nest, concubine Yu had seen this subject's wife pass by and suddenly came out from the bushes on the side of the road. That road was a secluded path with no good scenery around it. It was also a path between the Qinquan Palace and the Xi'an Palace. That day, concubine Yu didn't come from the Empress Dowager's palace to the Xi'an Palace. The probability of bumping into her was not high. Of course, concubine Yu could also be said to be a coincidence. However, she had coincidentally come out of the bushes and bumped into this subject's wife. This was definitely suspicious. Furthermore, this subject's wife asked Your Majesty to carefully investigate the poisoned bird's nest and the poisoned pug dog. Even if something had happened among the people, there would still be a coroner who would conduct an autopsy. No one can be sure that the pug dog was poisoned. Perhaps there was no poison in the bird's nest. After Qin Yining's detailed explanation, everyone present finally had a better understanding of what had happened that day. They were no longer clueless. There were indeed many suspicious points in this matter. However, the most suspicious point was that Your Majesty didn't even investigate the matter. He only locked the person up for a few days before directly convicting her. Everyone understood what this meant, even if he didn't say anything. Li Qiqian's face darkened. Now that Qin Yining had exposed this matter, his attitude, just now, was very likely to become a topic of discussion for others behind his back. This cunning and troublesome person was as difficult to deal with as Pang Zhishi. Li Qiqian's face stiffened. Just as he was about to speak, the sound of footsteps came from outside. Immediately after, a young eunuch came in to report. Your Majesty, the two servant girls of the Prince Zhongshuan's consort said that they have important evidence to report. When Li Qiqian heard this, he said in a deep voice, "Send it in." The eunuch outside the door immediately sent the message in a loud voice. Qin Yining's expression was solemn. The Empress Dowager, on the other hand, widened her eyes. How could she have forgotten about this? That day, Consort Shun had come to tell her that the two servant girls of Qin Yining had disappeared. She had sent people to look for them in private, but they hadn't been found. She didn't pay much attention to it and gradually let it go. She didn't expect these people to appear at this time. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager said quickly and anxiously, these two servant girls can't be trusted. That day, they followed the Qin clan to deliver the bird's nest. However, when the guard arrived, the two people were already gone. They only caught the Qin clan. These days, Aijia has been secretly looking for these two people. Unexpectedly, they appeared today. Your Majesty, please be careful that they have evil intentions. The Empress Dowager said, Your Majesty, please calm down. Those two servant girls don't have evil intentions. They have always been by my side. What? The Empress Dowager was shocked and angrily glared at the Empress. You're crazy? How dare you shelter two fugitives? The Empress Dowager felt that she was about to be killed by the dissatisfied looks of Li Qiqian and the Empress Dowager. However, seeing the Empress Dowager jumping about in public, she wasn't afraid at all. Empress Dowager, please calm down. These two servant girls aren't fugitives. The Qin clan aren't fugitives either. This concubine didn't shelter them to hide criminals. Even if they really did commit a crime, Your Majesty hasn't said anything. Who has the right to convict them of crime? Besides, Your Majesty hasn't said anything yet. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her face and ears turned red. She felt extremely uneasy. Li Qiqian held her breath and said in a low voice, "Bring them in. Jin wants to see what they have to say." At this time, Qin Yining was very grateful. She never thought that it would be the Empress. She helped her hide Bingtang and Ji Yun. Not long after, the eunuch led 2 women in light green palace-made attire into the room. Chapter 801. Li Qiqian's face darkened as he looked at the 2 maids who were dressed in ordinary clothes. He would never have thought that there would be people who would do Qin Yining by the Emperor's side. "What evidence do you have? Speak." Li Qiqian's tone was very impatient, and he wanted to quickly end this matter. Bingtang took out 2 small porcelain boxes from her sleeve and placed them on the ground in front of her. She kowtowed and said, "Replying to Your Majesty, this is the evidence that this servant took from the overturned bird's nest and the dead pug's mouth." The nobles and womenfolk all stretched their necks and looked at the 2 porcelain bottles on the carpet. Some of the womenfolk even picked up their handkerchiefs to cover their noses and mouths, as if they had smelled something strange. Bingtang said, "This servant has some medical skills. These days, this servant has used many methods and finally confirmed that the bird's nest is indeed poisonous and the pug was indeed poisoned to death. However, the poison in the bird's nest and the poison in the pug are 2 different poisons." As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned for a moment. The Empress Dowager was shocked and couldn't help but clench her hands. Her elbows hit the small table beside her, making a loud sound. She didn't even realize it. Li Qiqian and the Empress were close to her, so how could they not see the Empress Dowager's strange behavior? They looked at the Empress Dowager in confusion, but found that the Empress Dowager's face was tense, her teeth were clenched, and her eyes were gloomy as she stared in one direction. The direction the Empress Dowager was looking at was where Li Helan, concubine Yu, and imperial concubine Yi were sitting. Li Qiqian narrowed his eyes. The Empress grabbed the armrest of her chair. Her eyes were full of shock and disbelief as she looked back at Li Qiqian. The husband and wife looked at each other and saw the answer in each other's eyes. Bingtang continued. After this servant analyzed it, this servant found that the poison in the pug was ordinary arsenic. However, the poison in the bird's nest is not ordinary. Could it be crane's head red or peacock's gallbladder? Someone asked curiously. Bingtang shook his head. Neither. This kind of poison came from Nanjiang, and it was not widely spread in Jianghu. It was said that there were some tribal leaders in Nanjiang who would first feed the food to their cats and dogs to determine whether it was poisonous or not. Someone found this poison in order to murder the chief of the tribe, and the assassination was successful despite the chief's strict defense. Bingtang looked up at Li Qiqian, then lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty, this poison is only effective on humans. It has no effect on animals. There's actually such a poisonous thing." Li Qiqian was astonished. Every meal he had, although there was a servant who tasted the poison, it still made one's heart tremble when they heard it. Yes, this poison is called dream death. When a person is poisoned, their brain and meridians will be paralyzed, and they will die instantly. It's not like the crane's head red and the other poisons that take a while to act up. Bingtang raised his head again and said, "In other words, dream death is only effective on humans, and once it's used, there's no cure. It's not like crane's head red, which has a time limit and can be cured." Bingtang's voice fell, and the hall fell silent. The noble family members who had previously dared to talk in agreement with Li Qiqian were now like quails with their feathers on fire, not daring to say anything. Everyone knew that this person had taken a poison that would cause a quick death. What did it mean for it to appear in the palace? Li Qiqian's face was ashen, but he didn't forget to observe the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was trembling with anger. Under the Empress Dowager's gaze, Li Helan's face was grave, while Consort Yin and Concubine Yu were suppressing their panic, their faces ashen. Seeing this, even if he didn't know the inside story, Li Qitian had a guess. The Empress also noticed this and timely said, "Your Majesty, Qin Xie thinks that you should ask Concubine Yu about this." Concubine Yu's pug was clearly fed arsenic in advance. She came and knocked over the bird's nest sent by the Qin clan, but insisted that the pug was poisoned to death by the bird's nest. Why would she do this? This was clearly premeditated, and there must be someone behind this. The Empress looked coldly at the Empress Dowager. Qin Xie can't tolerate anyone trying to kill the imperial prince behind her back. Your Majesty, Qin Xie's heart chills at the thought of having such a person in the palace. The Empress Dowager suddenly came back to her senses and met the Empress's gaze. She unconsciously looked away, but then felt guilty and stared back. The nobles and womenfolk had already seen the expressions of the imperial family members when they spoke. No one was a fool, and everyone had a guess in their hearts. But everyone tactfully lowered their heads again, not looking or listening, and remained silent. Li Qitian's right thumb and index finger quickly moved. When he suddenly stopped, he ordered in a deep voice, "Invite Deputy Lu." Your Majesty. Xiong Jinshui, who was waiting on the side, immediately received the order and quickly ran out, silent as a cicada in winter. In less than half an hour, the white-haired Deputy Lu rushed over, panting, carrying a medicine box. He took the evidence and retreated to the trees to examine it. At this time, Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang were still kneeling in place. The nobles and womenfolk also didn't say a word. Li Qitian's fingernails lightly tapped on the small table. His eyes looked around, finally landing on Concubine Yi and Concubine Yu. With his intelligence, he could already figure out the entire situation. Who didn't want the imperial prince to die and wanted to harm Qin Yining? It could be the Empress Dowager. So the Empress Dowager arranged for Concubine Yu to block the way and ensure that the bird's nest wouldn't enter Cunning Palace. Who wanted the imperial prince to die in this incident? Then it could only be Concubine Yi and Concubine Yu. But Concubine Yu had clearly been instructed by someone to use arsenic to block the way. Presumably, she didn't know the reason, or perhaps she did, but was just a chess piece. What about Concubine Yi? She relied on her beauty, high status, and good family background. If the eldest prince died, she would have hope if she had any children in the future. Moreover, Concubine Yi was the Empress Dowager's niece and could enter Sin Palace at will. She had enough motive to secretly switch the poison behind the Empress Dowager's back. Truly vicious. If one didn't think about it carefully, it wouldn't be clear. The dirty matters in the harem were obviously no less than those in the previous dynasty. Before Deputy Lu came, he had already heard Xiong Jinshui explain the situation. Now that he had a direction to investigate, it took him less than an hour to obtain the results of the examination. Replying to Your Majesty. After this official's examination, one of the two poisons is the commonly seen arsenic, while the other is a poison. This old official still needs to examine it carefully to know the results, but I can confirm that they are indeed two different poisons. Everyone continued to remain silent. At this time, Li Qitian's face was ashen. Qin Yining kowtowed and said, "This official's wife was ordered to enter the palace to accompany Concubine Shun. Before entering the palace, all of my clothes and accessories were carefully inspected and confirmed that there were no dangerous poisons brought into the palace. The bird's nest was made in the small kitchen of Xian Palace. When the palace servants brought it over, this official's wife was only carrying a food box. This official's wife could have poisoned it, but there was no reason to poison it. Thinking about it carefully, Concubine Yu brought the poisoned pug dog to block the way and deliberately knocked over the food box. She used the pug dog's death to expose the poison in the bird's nest. It seems like someone knew that the bird's nest was poisoned and didn't want the imperial prince to be harmed. They also didn't want to miss the opportunity to slander this official's wife, so they ordered Concubine Yu to knock it over. Your Majesty, please interrogate Concubine Yu. The real culprit will definitely be caught." Qin Yining kowtowed and continued to kneel in place. Chapter 802. Even if he hadn't poisoned Pang Xiao this time, Li Qitian would have thought of a way to plan an accident to test Pang Xiao's attitude. Coincidentally encountering this matter, Li Qiqian simply took advantage of this matter to vent his anger. But he didn't think that poisoning would create such a big loophole. Li Qiqian didn't know if he should be angry that his son was poisoned or angry that this group of idiots didn't do things properly. Li Qiqian's anger surged. But the angrier he was, the calmer his expression was, and his voice was gentle. "Consort Prince Zhongshuan, stand up and have a seat. Your Majesty is wise and observant." Chen Fu is endlessly grateful. Qin Yining bowed. When she stood up, her knees hurt so much that she couldn't help but stagger. Ji Yun and Bing Tang hurriedly supported her arms. Looking at the wrist that they didn't notice, Bing Tang and Ji Yun only realized how much weight Qin Yining had lost. The bones on her wrist were protruding, and it was a bit painful to hold. Ji Yun's tears immediately poured out. It took a lot of effort to stop the tears from falling. These days, she and Bing Tang ate well and lived well in the Empress Palace. The one who suffered was her master, who was locked up by the Empress Dowager. But their words carried little weight, and they couldn't beg the Empress to go to sea and palace to disobey the Empress Dowager and treat Qin Yining well. The Empress was benevolent enough to give them time and materials to study poisons. They could only wait anxiously. If Wang Yi knew that their master had suffered so much, Wang Yi would go crazy. Xiong Jin Shui called for a small eunuch to bring a round chair and place it at the head of the seats for the noble families. Then he politely invited Qin Yining to sit. At this time, everyone was waiting for Li Qiqian to express his stance. The matter was very clear. Since it had nothing to do with Qin Yining, then someone must have framed her. And it was clear that the problem was with concubine Yu. Li Qiqian called everyone to watch. He wanted to show his benevolence by convicting Qin Yining without an investigation. Now that it had happened, the best way was to interrogate concubine Yu on the spot and give Qin Yining justice. Only then could he completely clear his name. But after waiting for a long time, Li Qiqian didn't express any stance and didn't have any intention of interrogating concubine Yu. Those who were observant came up with several versions of the story in their hearts. They lowered their eyes to hide their thoughts. Li Qiqian was caught between a rock and a hard place. He didn't want to reveal the inside story in front of others, but he had to give an explanation in public. Hope concubine Yu was smart. Otherwise, he would make concubine Yu's regret. Yupin. Li Qiqian's cold gaze landed on Yupin. Concubine Yu was already trembling in fear. Her body was weak. Li Qiqian's voice pulled her back to reality. She immediately stood up. Because she didn't have any strength, she directly slid down from the chair and sat on the ground. She trembled for a long time before kneeling upright. "Your Majesty, this concubine is here." Li Qiqian said. "Speak. Why did you feed your pet dog arsenic? Why did you coincidentally find the path the Prince Zhongshuan would take? At that time, the dog happened to knock over the food box and insist that your pet was poisoned by the bird's nest?" Concubine Yu trembled like a leaf in the wind. Cold sweat continuously slid down her forehead and temples. The delicate makeup on her face and bright red lips made her complexion look even paler. She remembered what the Empress Dowager said when she was alone with her to admire the flowers. She remembered the strange smile on the Empress Dowager's mama's face when she handed her the bag of arsenic. She wanted to say everything. She didn't want to be someone's scapegoat. But now that concubine Yu realized, if she didn't become the scapegoat, even if the Empress Dowager didn't retaliate against her family, your Majesty wouldn't let them go. Didn't you see how your Majesty acted when he wanted to kill the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine? She was just an unfavored concubine. How could she compare to a Wang Fei who relied on her husband's status? Thinking of this, concubine Yu couldn't help but feel shocked and aggrieved. She said with tears and snot, "Your Majesty, this concubine knows her wrongs. It was this concubine deliberately framed Wang Fei." The Empress sat up straight. Her muscles tensed as she asked, "You did it yourself? What grudge do you have with the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine? Why would you do this? Someone must have ordered you to do this, right?" The Empress Dowager's voice followed. Her voice was sharp as she said, "Someone must have ordered you. Concubine Yu, tell the truth." Concubine Yu understood the Empress Dowager's words were a warning. Concubine Yu's tears flowed even more fiercely. But when she thought of her parents and relatives, her original intention to tell the truth was completely extinguished. Even if she was used as a tool, if she clenched her teeth, her family might be able to survive. If the imperial family had a bit of conscience, her family might be able to live a better life. After making up her mind, Concubine Yu kowtowed and said, "It was this concubine. This concubine saw that the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine was beautiful and could have twins. This concubine was jealous and planned to slander her." "Is that so? Then can you explain?" "Empress." Li Qiqian interrupted the Empress's question. In his heart, he scolded this woman who didn't know what was good for her. With a gloomy face, he said to Concubine Yu, "You were jealous, so you could poison her? You dared to hide a highly poisonous substance in the palace. You must be up to no good." Concubine Yu cried even more desperately. This concubine didn't. This concubine didn't. This concubine was. This concubine was. "Someone come." Li Qiqian stood up angrily. "Concubine Yu secretly hid a highly poisonous substance and intended to murder the imperial heir and frame the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine. She is really hateful. Immediately banish her to the cold palace. All her servants and attendants are to be beaten to death." "Yes, your majesty." Xiong Jinshui immediately gave the order and rushed forward. He covered Concubine Yu's mouth with his big hand to prevent her from saying anything that would make your majesty unhappy. He called 2 eunuchs to drag Concubine Yu away, one on the left and one on the right. The nannies and eunuchs who came with Concubine Yu were all crying out loudly, but they were still mercilessly taken away. Seeing this, Li Qiqian secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Since there was a chance to end this matter, he must seize it decisively, lest the matter become even more unmanageable. The Empress's hand on the round-backed chair gradually relaxed. She looked at Li Qiqian's side face in disbelief, and then slowly leaned back in the chair. This man, for the sake of his overall situation, didn't even care about his own family. What else could she hope for? Li Qiqian said in a deep voice, "Today's matter has come to light. Zhen has also made a decision. Your Majesty is wise." The nobles and womenfolk all stood up and saluted. Seeing that the matter was over, Li Qiqian didn't plan to keep these people. He was about to speak when he suddenly heard a commotion outside. Then, the sound of uniform footsteps approached from afar. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Jiziyu even jumped up. "What's the matter?" The palace servants in front of the hall shouted. Chapter 803. Caught fire? How could catch fire? The Empress Dowager stood up and screamed in panic. The Empress, Li Helan, and the other womenfolk were also shocked. They were really scared out of their wits by the palace coup. Now that they suddenly heard about it, they were all panicking. At this time, the guards outside the hall quickly walked into the main hall of Xi'an Palace. They knelt in front of the door and said, "Your Majesty, the Palace of Heavenly Purity caught fire. I don't know who spread the rumor that your Majesty has. The people in the palace are restless. Coupled with the fierce fire, the situation is very chaotic." Li Qiqian's face was as calm as water. "Zhen is here. Who would spread such rumors?" The nobles said, "Your Majesty, this is obviously a plot by someone with bad intentions. Ignorant people naturally don't know your Majesty's whereabouts. They can't be sure that your Majesty is safe and sound. Naturally, they will listen to the rumors. I'm afraid that the plotters are waiting for your Majesty to come out and refute the rumors. They want to take the opportunity to assassinate you." "Exactly. It's possible that someone with bad intentions first spread rumors and then secretly besieged Xi'an Palace. Your Majesty should quickly evacuate." Everyone was talking at once. The more they analyzed, the more serious their expressions became. At this time, there was another clamor outside the hall. There were palace servants anxiously shouting, "Your Majesty has passed away. The inner palace is going to be chaotic." There are also people shouting, "Quickly run for your life. Your Majesty has passed away. The rebel army is going to attack." The palace servants who had experienced the coup still remembered the incident of seizing the palace. Now that the rumors spread, everyone was so sure that the palace was going to change. Who could remain calm? The palace servants in palace didn't dare to breathe loudly. They knew that your majesty was still sitting inside safe and sound. They wouldn't be scared by such rumors. However, if your majesty heard the shouts outside, would they still be alive? The palace servants had already trembled and knelt on the ground for fear of angering your majesty. Li Qitian listened to the shouts outside Sayan Palace and sneered. It's really strange. Jin has passed away and Jin doesn't even know. Huh. Your majesty, please calm down. Everyone stood up and bowed, trembling as they apologized. Your subjects are incompetent. Li Qitian waved his hand. Take a seat. Perhaps someone is impatient and wants to rebel. As he spoke, Li Qitian's gaze fell on Qin Yining. He suspected that Pang Xiao had heard about the Qin Yining incident and rushed back to the capital to cause such a ruckus. If it was really Pang Xiao's rebellion and Qin Yining was still in his hands, he would have one more bargaining chip and one more chance of winning. Some of the womenfolk were so scared that their faces turned pale. Some had already wiped away their tears. The Empress Dowager was so frightened that her entire body trembled. She had never thought that her Sai and palace would become a target. Emperor, what should we do? Li Qitian just smiled faintly. Mother, you don't have to worry. Some of the nobles tried to persuade him. Your majesty should leave this place. The palace servants don't know your majesty's whereabouts, but the rebels might know. If a group of people really break into Xi'an Palace, won't your majesty be in danger? Your majesty should quickly hide in a safe place. Many people agreed, with one person's suggestion. Li Qitian looked at Ji Ziyu, who had remained silent and expressionless. Duke Ding, what do you think? Replying to your majesty, this subject thinks that it's not a good time to move. Ji Ziyu's words were concise and comprehensive. Li Qitian asked, why do you say that? Ji Ziyu said calmly, if there really are bandits who intend to harm Sun Palace, the best thing to do is to guard this place and wait for rescue. If we move around carelessly, we'll be easily targeted and the danger will be greater. Li Qitian smiled and nodded. My beloved subject's words are reasonable. Your Majesty, your safety is still the most important thing. Someone was still unwilling to give up. Li Qitian stubbornly sat up straight and said resolutely, we won't leave. We want to see what kind of rebels dare to set fire to the palace of heavenly purity and come to Xi'an Palace to arrest us. Li Qitian's words were powerful and resonant. It was obvious that he didn't panic in the face of such a situation. Ji Ziyu stood up and said, this subject is willing to lead people to the palace of heavenly purity to arrest the bandits and share your majesty's worries. Li Qitian nodded in agreement. Arresting the bandits is important, but if you stay here, there will be others who will go to the palace of heavenly purity. Ji Ziyu was a talented commander and was also highly skilled in martial arts. With him by his side, it would be an additional layer of protection. Only a fool would let him go to the palace of heavenly purity to arrest the bandits. At this time, the best plan was to wait and see. Ji Ziyu immediately understood Li Qitian's meaning. He cupped his hands and said, this subject swears to protect your majesty's safety with my life. Very good. Li Qitian nodded with a smile. Ji Ziyu was like a stabilizing force. Hearing that he wouldn't leave, everyone secretly sighed in relief. It was as if as long as he was here, nothing would happen to Xi'an Palace. Li Qitian ordered people to go to the palace of heavenly purity to check the situation. He also had Ji Ziyu command the guards to strictly guard Xi'an Palace. The rest of the people stayed where they were and quietly listened to the movements outside. The noise was louder than before. According to the palace servants, Li Qitian, the emperor, had already passed away and the country was about to change dynasties. Everyone present was nervous, especially the empress. Brother Hao was still in the palace of heavenly purity. If something were to happen to the prince, how could she, as his mother, live on? The women and nobles' family members all frowned with worry. If there really was a rebellion in the palace, then staying by Li Qitian's side would be the most dangerous place. Once the rebels really broke in, wouldn't they all become targets? Although they thought this, no one dared to leave at this time. If they really left, wouldn't it be telling Li Qitian that they didn't want to accompany him and that they could die by themselves? Qin Yining's beautiful eyes turned and saw everyone's reaction. He admired Li Qitian's calmness in the face of trouble. Perhaps most of the founding monarchs who had gone through many years of war were not lacking in courage like Li Qitian. The atmosphere in Xi'an Palace was oppressive. After sitting for an hour, Jiziyu came back quickly to report. Your Majesty, the guards have investigated the situation and are coming to report. Speak. Yes. The guards came forward and kowtowed, saying, reporting to your Majesty, the fire in the Palace of Heavenly Purity has been controlled. Fortunately, the fire was controlled in time and the damage was not great. However, several palace servants of the Palace of Heavenly Purity lost their lives in the fire. After investigation, it was confirmed that the fire started in the south side of the Palace of Heavenly Purity, a small side room near the Imperial Study. Moreover, there were no traces of kerosene being used there. Li Qitian nodded. It seems that someone deliberately set the fire. That's right. In addition, the source of the rumor has not been found. Fortunately, the palace has controlled it. Li Qitian's tense, sitting posture relaxed. Everyone in the hall sighed in relief. Li Qitian muttered, if we can't find the source of the matter, peace will be short-lived. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. Yes. The guards saluted and respectfully retreated. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. In any case, the situation was now stable. Their lives could be saved. Qin Yining's heart sank. This was because she thought of Jiang Yuan, who helped her pass the news a while ago. He was serving tea in the Imperial Study. She was not sure if the fire today had anything to do with Jiang Yuan. She was also not sure if this person was still alive. She wanted to know about Jiang Yuan's situation because he was someone arranged by Pang Xiao and Jiziyu. They wanted to arrange for him to be in the Imperial Study and personally handle Li Qitian's matters. This was a rare nail. However, at this moment, it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. Qin Yining's complexion was not good to begin with. She was suppressing something in her heart. Her slightly furrowed brows made her look even weaker. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were afraid that Qin Yining would faint and be accused of being rude in front of the emperor. They nervously held her shoulders on both sides, as if they were afraid that Qin Yining would slip off her chair. At this moment, the imperial guards had already completely controlled the situation in the palace. Li Qitian also ordered people to tidy up the palace and pacify the chaotic palace servants before continuing to investigate the source of the rumors. In the end, it was scary but not dangerous. Li Qitian smiled and said to the people around him, I didn't expect that such a thing would happen when I called everyone into the palace. However, today's matter can be considered complete. Prince Zhongshuan's consort has been cleared of the charges. This is also a good thing. Your Majesty is wise. Everyone stood up and bowed. Qin Yining also stood up and bowed. Li Qitian looked at Qin Yining. His smile was as warm as the winter sun, but the words he said made Qin Yining feel uncomfortable. This time, I've really wronged you. In any case, you are a person of status and have the power of the Qingtian alliance in your hands. It's only because you are a woman. If you were a man, I would have kept you by my side and put you in an important position. Li Qitian's words made all the nobles present laugh heartily. The atmosphere was lively. Li Qitian nodded with satisfaction and said, Fortunately, you are Pang Zhishi's wife, so you are part of our family. This matter has wronged you, but we are all family. You don't mind, right? What could Qin Yining say? Li Qitian could shamelessly say, I don't mind, right? Could she say, I mind very much in front of everyone? She was already very lucky to be able to escape with her life today. She didn't know why Li Qitian changed his attitude after hearing one sentence and gave her a chance to defend herself. Right now, she couldn't cause any more trouble. She still understood the principle of stopping while she was ahead. Seeing that Qin Yining didn't say anything, Li Qitian nodded with satisfaction and said, You can go back to your residence in Chuxiu Palace and rest. Things had already developed to this point, but he still didn't allow her to leave the palace? Qin Yining originally thought that Li Qitian might directly let her go back to her residence, but now her hopes were dashed. She understood in her heart that Li Qitian was afraid that she would act too freely outside and do something that would affect his plans. Perhaps he was also concerned about the Qingtian alliance in her hands. Otherwise, Li Qitian wouldn't have mentioned it in front of everyone. Everyone present was also surprised by Li Qitian's instructions. The nobles couldn't help but exchange glances. However, no one dared to open their mouth to ask, let alone show the slightest bit of surprise or bewilderment. The situation was more important than the person. Qin Yining could only stand and salute. This subject's wife thanks your majesty. Li Qitian nodded and told everyone to disperse. He also called Princess Tana and said, Consort Shun, arrange for people to serve your guest. Chapter 804. In this way, at least in front of others, it was Princess Tana who invited Qin Yining. Li Qitian only spoke for her because he doted on Princess Tana. It wasn't that he, as the emperor, wanted to hold the family members of his subjects hostage in the palace. Everyone present was smart. Other than bowing and asking to leave, no one said anything else. Consort also mixed in with the other concubines. She bowed and left. She was very nervous. She felt that today's matter was too smooth, too much in line with her expectations. Things had reached this point, but your majesty didn't investigate carefully, let alone find her and punish her. Consort let out a long sigh. Her hanging heart could finally settle down. As long as she didn't find her face to face, she believed that the Empress Dowager would protect her in the future. No matter what, she was still the Empress Dowager's niece. Even if she was 1,000 times bad, the Empress Dowager wouldn't allow a flaw in her family's conduct. She would definitely protect her. At most, she would secretly curse her a few times. Consort thought optimistically. In Xi'an Palace, everyone had already left. Only Li Helan wanted to stay and talk with the Empress Dowager. Li Qitian also spoke first. Lan'er should also leave first. Li Helan felt that something was wrong. She wanted to act spoiled and shamelessly pester him to stay. But when she met Li Qitian's gaze, she immediately swallowed her words. The imperial brother in front of her was no longer the imperial brother who was obedient to her and treated her like a treasure. Li Helan bowed and said, yes. She looked worriedly at the Empress Dowager and quickly walked out. She also ordered people to guard the door and not allow anyone to disturb or come close. Everyone has left. Li Qitian looked at the Empress Dowager with a smile, but there was a hint of viciousness in his smile. Imperial Mother, now that there are no outsiders, can you talk to Jin? The Empress Dowager's smile was a bit forced. It was obvious that she was guilty. What does the Emperor want Aijia to say? Aijia doesn't understand. Don't understand? Li Qitian raised the corner of her mouth and smiled mockingly. Does Imperial Mother take everyone for fools? Do you really think that today's matter has been covered up so well that no one would be able to tell that you're the culprit? The Empress Dowager's face instantly turned pale. He knew. He actually knew. Emperor, please listen to my explanation. The Empress Dowager anxiously grabbed Li Qitian's hand and said, How is my grandson? How could I harm him? I have no intention of harming brother How at all. Li Qitian smiled and nodded. We believe that. Otherwise, Yupin wouldn't have appeared there. But the dream of death in the bird's nest. Mother, what you prepared was arsenic, right? The Empress Dowager nodded, her heart beating rapidly. She already understood that Imperial concubine would not be able to be saved. Emperor, this matter was due to Aijia's lack of planning. I didn't expect Imperial concubine to have such thoughts. If you didn't think of it, you wouldn't have arranged for Imperial concubine you. You also don't trust her. Li Qitian coldly stood up and said, Jean knows that Imperial Mother is doing this for the sake of the family's face and glory. Seeing that you are Jean's birth mother, Jean will not reveal this matter. This black pot and this joke will be carried by Jean. However, Imperial concubine, cannot continue to be kept. Emperor, Imperial concubine, has served you for a while. Although that child's heart was muddled for a moment, she isn't someone who would deliberately do evil. If she didn't intend to do evil, then she would poison my son. Moreover, she used a poison-like dream of death that has no hope of being cured. If she intended to do evil, wouldn't she also poison me to death? We won't allow the person sleeping next to me to have such a vicious heart. Li Qitian suddenly looked back at the Empress Dowager. Imperial Mother can't bear to part with her? Could it be that you can bear to part with your son and grandson? No, no. Li Qitian suddenly moved closer to the Empress Dowager and bluntly said, Imperial Mother is attached to power and has always been at odds with the Empress. She's at a good age and doesn't want to live a peaceful life. We could turn a blind eye to all of this. Who told you to be our Imperial Mother? But Imperial Mother's heart is getting bigger and bigger. You want to cultivate your relatives and even want to use a woman to control our harem. Could it be that in Imperial Mother's eyes, we are that kind of soft-hearted weakling? Emperor, don't misunderstand. I don't think so. No? Who was the one behind the coup in the palace? We were buried in the underground palace. What did Imperial Mother do? The real Empress was pregnant and locked up in the palace by Prince Li. Has Imperial Mother ever thought that the child she is carrying is our flesh and blood, your grandson? With every sentence Li Qitian said, the Empress Dowager's face became more miserable. After a series of words, the Empress Dowager's face became pale and limp in her chair. Li Qitian stood up and said with an expressionless face, Us not pursuing this matter is already benevolent. Imperial Mother, you can deal with it yourself. If you don't deal with it well, we will deal with it personally. The Empress Dowager repeatedly shook her head. Looking at Li Qitian, this was the first time she felt such fear and unfamiliarity. This was even more frightening than the coup in the palace. Li Qitian didn't look back as he strode out of San Palace. The Empress Dowager sat in her seat in a daze. Her mind was blank. She didn't even know what she was thinking or what she should be thinking. She suddenly remembered before Li Qitian participated in the great enterprise. At that time, her husband was still alive. Although their family wasn't very rich, they still lived happily together. They could be happy to have new clothes made for the new year and be excited to eat roasted chicken. Now, she was wearing silk and satin and eating delicious food, but she could no longer find that feeling of happiness and excitement. She also didn't have the warmth of being together as a family. They used to be a close family, but when it came to power, they were suspicious of each other and alienated from each other. Her own son had actually become like this. The Empress Dowager's tears suddenly fell like rain. After crying for a long time, the Empress Dowager suddenly wiped her face. Someone come. The mama, who had been waiting outside the door, heard this and quickly came in. She bowed and said, Empress Dowager, come here. The tears on the Empress Dowager's face had not dried, but her eyes became determined. She whispered a few words in the mama's ear. A trace of shock flashed across the mama's face. Then her expression became more and more serious. In the end, she responded in a low voice and quickly retreated. When Qin Yining returned to Chuxiu Palace, he immediately ordered people to prepare a hot bath. She tiredly soaked in the hot water, her arms resting on the edge of the wooden tub. She raised her head to let Bingtang wash her hair. Ji Yin used a wooden spoon to scoop up the warm water with rose petals floating on it and sprinkled it on her long hair. Looking at her collarbone and thin arms, she said in a choked voice, Wang Fei, you have suffered. Qin Yining smiled and maintained his previous posture. He said in a low voice, You said that the eunuch whispered a few words in your majesty's ear, and your majesty changed his mind. What did he say? Is there any news from the south? Ji Yin shook her head. Maybe. Bing Tang said, This servant thinks that it must be. If your majesty did not have something to worry about today, it must be that Wang Yi did something that forced your majesty to change his mind. Qin Yining smiled again and said, I think so too. However, they were now trapped in the palace. Even after such a big thing happened, Li Qitian did not give up on the idea of keeping her in the palace as a hostage. He made her completely cut off from the outside world, so she did not know anything. That's right, keep an eye on whether Jiang Yuan is still in the imperial study. Of course, don't take the initiative to inquire about it, so as to avoid being discovered. After all, the Palace of Heavenly Purity's fire is such a big matter. Your Majesty must have ordered people to investigate it. It's best not to give yourself away. Yes, this servant understands. Qin Yining nodded. Remember, don't purposely inquire about it. Just keep an eye on it. Yes. Bing Tang and Ji Yun actually had the same suspicions as Qin Yining. The timing of the Palace of Heavenly Purity's fire was too coincidental. If your Majesty had not changed his mind at the last minute and pulled Imperial Concubine Yu to take the blame, Qin Yining would have been convicted long ago. When the Palace of Heavenly Purity caught fire, the palace was in chaos, and there were rumors of bandits or rebels killing people in the palace. The frightened palace servants were fleeing in all directions. In fact, it was the best time to take advantage of the chaos to escape. They all suspected that Jiang Yuan, in order to save Qin Yining's life, thought that Qin Yining would definitely be severely punished by your Majesty. So he set the fire to attract everyone's attention and give Qin Yining a chance to escape. Just as they were thinking this, a palace maid suddenly ran through the corridor outside while shouting, "Not good! Not good! Imperial Concubine Shun!" The three people looked at each other. Qin Yining hurriedly got up and asked Bing Tang to bring her close. Ji Yun quickly walked to the door and leaned against it to listen to the movements outside. Princess Dana was eating fruit in the hall when she was startled by the sudden shout. She angrily said, "What are you shouting about?" "Someone died." Replying to Imperial Concubine Shun, someone did die. This servant just heard that Imperial Concubine Yi's heart palpitations flared up and she died of illness. What? Wasn't she fine in Saiyan Palace just now? Princess Dana was shocked. She couldn't understand how a perfectly fine person could suddenly die of illness. She didn't usually notice that Imperial Concubine Yi had heart problems. Ji Yin turned around and looked at Qin Yining and Bing Tang, who had also heard this. The three people returned to the inner room. Qin Yining then said, "She was just a chess piece." In the end, the Empress Dowager needed a scapegoat and didn't want this matter to implicate her maternal family. Naturally, she could only die of illness. Wang Fei, you're saying that she might have been... It must be... Qin Yining put on a thick robe and a dark green jacket. She had Bing Tang help her dry her hair. At this time, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside. Then she heard a familiar voice. "Is Imperial Concubine Prince Zhongshuan here?" "It's son Momo, the Empress's personal servant." Qin Yining quickly said, "Quickly invite her in." Ji Yun quickly opened the hall door and politely invited her in. Son Momo's face was filled with anxiety. When she saw Qin Yining, she didn't have time to bow and immediately said, "Wang Fei, something happened in your family." Bing Tang's hand that was holding the wooden comb stopped. Qin Yining also looked up and looked at son Momo with watery eyes. Chapter 805. Qin Yining stared blankly at Sun Mama and didn't speak for a long time. The wooden comb in Bing Tang's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. "Sun Mama, you're saying that my father was killed?" Granny Sun couldn't bear to look away and nodded heavily. His Imperial Majesty was just talking to the Empress in the Palace of Earthly Tranquility when someone came to report to His Imperial Majesty. The Empress was nearby and heard everything. At that time, His Imperial Majesty left in a hurry. The Empress ordered this servant to inform you. After hesitating for a moment, Sun Mama continued, "Actually, Her Ladyship said that His Majesty might have told you about this matter, and it wasn't worth it for her to tell you in advance. However, in the end, she still considered your friendship." The last sentence had a deeper meaning. Your Majesty might have told her, which meant that there was a high possibility that he wouldn't tell her. If Li Qiqian insisted on keeping her in the palace, then she wouldn't have a reason to leave without telling her that something had happened to her family Qin. In any case, as long as she was in the palace, as long as Li Qiqian wanted, she wouldn't have any way to know what was going on outside. Qin Yining's lips twitched. Her dry eyes slowly moved, and her eyes were already red. She said with difficulty, "Many thanks to the Empress. Sun Mama, please tell the Empress that Shenfu will be careful and won't let anyone suspect the Empress." Hearing Qin Yining say this, Sun Mama sighed and couldn't help but smile. Wang Fei is a sensible person. Then this servant will leave. "Ji Yun, help me send Sun Mama out." "Yes." Ji Yun politely sent Sun Mama out. Qin Yining sat in place with her hands folded on her knees and looked at her face in the mirror. Everyone said that she looked 70% like her father when he was young. But now that her father was old and had grown a beard, there was no trace of immaturity and handsomeness on his newly wrinkled face. Instead, it had become a refined and calm face that had settled over the years. Qin Yining's fingers slowly stroked his cheek. A teardrop rolled down from his red right eye and dripped onto his palm. It was very hot. Father is dead? She had tried her best to spread the news and seek help from Shiyu's people. In the end, was it too late? Li Qitian pretended to be a fool in front of Sun Gui and was shameless enough to punish her. Then, it was very likely that her father had also made a move at the same time. In these short 20 days, Shiyu's people might not even be able to walk out of the desert. His brain seemed to have frozen, and he had completely lost the ability to think. Qin Yining looked at himself in the mirror and thought of his father. When she had first returned home, her mother had suspected that she wasn't her biological daughter and had made things difficult for her. Her grandmother and sisters didn't like her either. Although her father didn't reveal his feelings at first, as a man, he wouldn't get involved in the matters of the inner residence. But every time she encountered difficulties, every time she was embroiled in the struggle of the imperial court, it was always her father who guided her and helped her. She was her father's only child. Her father didn't care that she was a woman and raised her as a son. She couldn't feel the love from others, but her father was the first to give it to her. Was such a good father really gone? Qin Yining kept wiping the tears on her face, but she couldn't wipe them off. Rationally, she knew that she should be calm and not let anyone see through her. She had just promised Sun Mama that she wouldn't cause trouble for the Empress. "Princess, don't be sad, you." Bing Tang and Ji Yun looked helplessly at Qin Yining, who was crying. They only hated themselves for being clumsy and didn't know how to persuade and comfort her. I know. Qin Yining lowered her head and clutched her skirt tightly. Her voice was hoarse. "I can't cry. I can't let people see my eyes are red and swollen. I live in a palace. Do I feel wronged? This will give people something to use against me. But I don't know what's wrong with me." The tears just flowed out by themselves. "What's wrong with me?" "Princess." Bing Tang sobbed and hugged Qin Yining. "Princess, don't wrong yourself. If you want to cry, just cry. You were wronged. What's wrong with crying? This servant knows that you're suffering in your heart." Ji Yun also opened her arms and hugged Bing Tang and Qin Yining. She cried and cursed. "Damn it. Sooner or later, I'll cut that muddle-headed ruler into pieces." Qin Yining closed her eyes and gritted her teeth to prevent herself from making a sound. Her hatred had never been as strong as it was now. There was no place for kindness and benevolence in this world. She already understood it when she experienced that bloody disaster in the Dian family Qin in her early years. But she still maintained a bit of innocence. Qin Yining even regretted it. If she had thought of a way to kill Li Qitian earlier, would all of this have not happened? However, she was only an ordinary woman. There was no medicine for regret in this world. At this time, in Qingxin Palace Hall, Li Qitian was glaring at the man in black kneeling in front of him with a dark expression. "What did I instruct you? HM? How did you do it?" "Your Majesty, please calm down. This servant is incompetent. This servant dares to guarantee that the people I found are all very reliable. This servant also didn't expect that Lord Qin and the supplies would suddenly disappear." Suddenly disappear? Li Qitian was so angry that he laughed. Although that was outside Tianyu Pass, it wasn't some gloomy place, was it? Without any warning, even the people and the supplies suddenly disappeared? Could it be that the bandits you found have relapsed and are trying to rob me? "Your Majesty, please calm down." The man in black pressed his forehead to the ground and trembled like a sieve. Li Qitian paced around the man in black with his hands clasped behind his back. Although he wanted to get rid of Qin Huayan, the things he rewarded the army with were real gold, silver, cloth, and food. I told you to kill people, and you told me you didn't know whether you killed them or not. Not only did you not complete the mission, you even lost the supplies. What use do I have for a rice bucket like you? The more Li Qiqian thought about it, the angrier he became. He kicked the man in the shoulder. The man in black rolled on the ground from the kick. He hurriedly got up and knelt properly again. He kowtowed and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Trash." The man in black kowtowed again and again. Li Qiqian closed his eyes and clasped his hands behind his back. He suddenly raised his head and took a deep breath. He then closed his eyes and slowly exhaled, as if he was smoking tobacco. When he opened his mouth again, Li Qiqian was very calm. "Get out and receive your punishment." "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty, for not killing me." The man in black felt as if he had been pardoned and hurriedly retreated. Li Qiqian clenched his hands into fists. He stood in the hall with his hands clasped behind his back and slowly closed his eyes. The chaotic emotions under his anger gradually settled down, and his thoughts gradually became clear. Qin Huaiyuan and the goods disappeared together. What was left behind were the corpses of the soldiers escorting them. What did this mean? It was possible that there was something wrong with the people he arranged. They were trying to rob the people and the goods. There would be more to follow. It was also possible that the Taitan knew about Qin Huaiyuan's reward for the army and ordered people to rob them to avenge their defeat. But there was another possibility. Qin Huaiyuan took the large amount of gold, silver, and food to the Taitan and rebelled against the imperial court. As the emperor, Li Qiqian was confident in his own position and charisma. He ordered people to find a group of famous bandits with the goal of killing Qin Huaiyuan. After the deed was done, these people would be taken in for his own use. For these bandits, it was equivalent to having a recognized identity. How lucky was it for these small bandits to be able to become the emperor's subordinates? Li Qiqian did not think that these bandits would give up the opportunity to walk in the light. In this way, Qin Huaiyuan was most likely to abscond with food and goods. Li Qiqian sneered. He slowly walked back to the warm calm by the window and sat down. He picked up the teacup and took a sip of the slightly cold tea. After a while, he said, "Xiong Jin Shui." The chief eunuch, who had been standing in the corner without any sense of presence, immediately stepped forward and bowed. "This servant is here. Go to the prince's mansion and tell the family Qin that that old bastard Qin Huaiyuan was intercepted outside Tianyu Pass. His body was not even left. Let them do as they see fit." Yes, Xiong Jin Shui did not immediately leave. As usual, Your Majesty should have other plans, such as a posthumous title or a reward. However, Xiong Jin Shui was experienced and tactful. He immediately saw that Li Qiqian had no intention of continuing. Xiong Jin Shui immediately bowed and retreated. He did not want to stay too long and incur the wrath of Your Majesty. Only when he was outside did Xiong Jin Shui let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that the family Qin had thoroughly angered the emperor. He had died without even a posthumous title. If Your Majesty did not state his position, nor did he give out any punishment, then what about Lord Qin's funeral? Lord Qin had died. Did he die for the sake of the imperial court? Or did he lose his life because of his own mistakes? Xiong Jin Shui could not figure it out, so he decided not to think too much about it. He simply followed Li Qiqian's orders and told the family Qin what he had just said. At this moment, Second Elder Qin and Third Elder Qin's eyes were wide open. They said in disbelief, "Eunuch, you mean to say that my eldest brother died in the line of duty?" Xiong Jin Shui said, "Lord Qin did not do a good job. He lost the gold, silver, and provisions that were supposed to be used as a reward for the army. He died outside the pass without leaving behind a corpse. Your Majesty told me to inform the rest of your family. In any case, Lord Qin was an old official." After Xiong Jin Shui finished speaking, he did not linger in the family Qin any longer. He cupped his hands and retreated. Second Elder Qin and Third Elder Qin fell to the ground, dumbstruck. They could not believe it, but reality did not allow them to not believe it. "Eldest brother, he really is gone? How can we tell Mother this? How can we tell her?" In the Dowager Duchess's heart, Qin Huaiyuan was her favorite. No matter how angry the Dowager Duchess was or how many mistakes she made, as long as Qin Huaiyuan was around, he could quickly calm the Dowager Duchess's anger and persuade her to make the right choice. But now, the pillar of the family Qin was suddenly gone. Second elder brother, isn't your Majesty's meaning a little too subtle? From Eunuch Xiong's words, why is it that eldest brother's death in the line of duty doesn't even count as dying in the line of duty? Third elder Qin's face was ashen. He had already guessed that there must have been a change in the imperial court. Someone must have slandered him in secret. Now, your Majesty must be waiting to punish eldest brother. While on a business trip, he encountered bandits and died without leaving behind a corpse. Your Majesty did not even say a word of sympathy. He even had the eunuch imply that our eldest brother did not do a good job. Your Majesty's actions. Chapter 806. Second Old Master and Third Old Master thought about how Qin Huaiyuan had taken care of them and promoted them over the years. Then they thought about how they had lost their lives for the imperial court, yet your Majesty had such an attitude. They couldn't help but grieve and cry bitterly. After the people from the palace came, the two old masters shut themselves in the room and cried. Naturally, they alerted the servants who were guarding outside the hall. However, no one dared to say anything and only hid their doubts in their hearts. In the inner residence, Old Madam, Second Madam, and the others were still unaware of what was happening outside. They were discussing with Second Madam and Han, Second Young Mistress, what to do about the marriage between Eighth Young Miss and Qin Huaining. They had chosen a date in the summer, and there were only 2 months left. They knew that the people from the palace had come. Seeing that Second Old Master and Third Old Master hadn't returned after a long time, Old Madam was a bit worried and ordered people to go to the front to inquire. Not long after, Second Old Master and Third Old Master came back with a maidservant with red and swollen eyes. Seeing the two like this, Old Madam was stunned. What's wrong? Could it be that bad news came from the palace? Could it be that something happened to Sister E? Qin Yining had been in the palace for so long, and the people from the palace had made her 2 sons cry until their eyes were swollen. Old Madam naturally thought that something had happened to Qin Yining. Second Old Master, Han, Second Young Mistress, Eighth Young Miss, Qin Huaining, and the others couldn't help but look at Second Old Master and Third Old Master with anxious expressions. The 2 brothers had already discussed it. How could they hide the family's funeral from Old Madam? They would have to know about this matter sooner or later. The 2 knelt down with a plop. Mother, don't be agitated when you hear this. Don't be sad. My eldest brother, he had an accident in the north. What? What happened to Brother Ming? Old Madam's eyes widened. Eldest brother, looking at Old Madam's appearance, Second Old Master really couldn't say it. Old Madam leaned forward and almost fell off the soft couch. Second Foreign and Mammy Qin hurriedly supported her on both sides. Third Elder Master saw that Second Elder Master couldn't say anything, so he could only open his mouth with difficulty. Your Majesty's Eunuch Xiong said that Big Brother was ordered to reward the army. When he was very close to the military camp outside Tianyu Pass, he encountered bandits. The provisions, gold, silver, and other things were all robbed. Big Brother didn't even have a corpse left. What? Second Madam exclaimed. Everyone was so shocked that they even forgot to cry for a moment. Old Madam's eyes stared blankly. After a long while, a hoarse voice came out from her throat. You are saying that Brother Ming is dead? Mother, please take care of yourself. Are you trying to coax me? Mother, don't be sad. Big Brother is really... Old Madam didn't wait for Second Old Master to finish his words and suddenly let out a miserable howl. My son, my brother Munger. What should I do? What should I do? God, you don't have eyes. The Dowager Duchess roared at the top of her lungs. Her eyes were red, but she couldn't shed any tears. She stared so hard that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. That boundless heartache and resentment made everyone's face fill with tears. Old Madam's screams spread to the corridor. All the servant girls now knew what had happened. Thinking of Qin Huaiyuan's good, they couldn't help but cry. Old Madam beat her chest and screamed randomly. No one could understand what she was screaming, but everyone could empathize with the grief of a mother losing her child. Brother Ming, after the last scream, Old Madam's eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness. Old Madam, Mother, the people in the room were in a mess. Some were pinching each other, and some were hurriedly looking for a doctor. The entire Wang Fu's side courtyard was in chaos. The news quickly spread to Yao, Qinggu, and the Yao clan's ears. How could this be? Everything was fine. How could this person die just like that? Yao clan asked the servant girl in astonishment. Did you hear it clearly? Could it be that you're deceiving me? This servant really heard it. It said that this person went to Tianyu Pass and was killed by bandits. The rewards were stolen, and Master Qin's body wasn't even left intact. At this moment, Old Madam of Family Qin has already fainted. The side courtyard is in a mess. Yao clan waved her hand and dismissed the servant girl. She asked Yao Qinggu, who was smoking a cigarette, Father, what should we do now? Does this count as in-law dying in the line of duty? Should we go and take a look? Yao Qinggu hesitated and said, Didn't you hear? He didn't do a good job. He lost everything and also lost his life. Then let's not go, so as to avoid getting into trouble. No, we still have to go. Yao Qinggu knocked his pipe on the edge of the Kong bed. Think about it. After all, we live under the same roof. Even if we don't go, in the eyes of outsiders, we are still a family. Moreover, we are in-laws. If we don't go, it's hard to avoid gossip. But Yao clan bit her lip and said, You said that the Wang Fu is temporarily loaned to the family Qin, but in the end, this is the Wang Fu. It doesn't matter if in-law dies, but if the mourning hall is placed in our house, how unlucky will it be? The Qin clan is not at home. If she is, we should discuss with her and ask her to place the mourning hall outside, so as to avoid bringing bad luck to our family. That's enough. They just died. If we say this, won't we be waiting for others to criticize us? Yao Qinggu stood up and shook the ash off his robe. He ordered Yao clan, Go change your clothes. Or something plain. We'll go together. Okay. Yao clan responded and quickly went outside. She changed into a sapphire blue robe, took off her hair ornaments, and put on silver jewelry. Then, together with Yao Qinggu, she went to the side courtyard where the family Qin lived. Second master and third master, along with Qin Han and Qin Yu, were at the front of the courtyard. They were discussing the matter of setting up the mourning hall. When they saw the two of them, they greeted them politely. Yao Qinggu said a few words of comfort and inadvertently exchanged a glance with Yao clan. Yao clan immediately understood. She wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and said, After such a thing happened, Dai Fu can't come back from the south. We can't ask him to leave his post without permission. However, sister, he must be brought out of the palace first. This is such a big matter. The in-law only has one daughter. We can't leave his biological daughter by his side. Second master and third master both nodded in agreement. It wasn't easy for their family to support each other to get to where they were today. Although their mother was biased and their eldest brother's achievements were higher than theirs, in the hearts of the brothers, they were very grateful and admired their eldest brother. To be fair, their eldest brother, Qin Huayuan, was very kind to them. Third master wiped his tears with his sleeve and said, In-law is right. We brothers will discuss this matter and then do it. Yao clan and Yao Qinggu both nodded. Yao clan first went to the inner residence to check on the Dowager Duchess. Yao Qinggu also walked to the side, leaving some space for second master and third master to talk. Third master said, In-law is right. Taking this opportunity to bring sister E out of the palace is the right thing to do. We don't know what the palace is planning to do in such a long time. Moreover, the situation in the imperial court is very complicated. Sister E might know more about the inside story from Wang Yi than we do. With Sister E at home, it will be easier for us to discuss this matter and not panic. Second master also nodded. In the past, no matter what happened to the family, they would always discuss it together to get through the difficult times. Although he was an uncle, he had to admit that Qin Yining's political foresight was far better than his. With Qin Yining at home, their family wouldn't get into trouble. After the two discussed, second master thought of a way to send a token to the palace. The next day, Qin Yining welcomed the empress. "Little sister, family Qin, please restrain your grief." The empress's eyes were full of sympathy. "Your Majesty said that with such a big matter happening to your family, it wouldn't be good for you to continue accompanying Consort Shun. You can leave the palace at any time." Qin Yining didn't sleep the entire night, so there were obvious dark circles under his eyes. He smiled tiredly at the empress and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Your voice, what happened to your throat?" Qin Yining's voice was very hoarse, and he almost couldn't make a sound. Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. The empress sighed with pity. "It's been hard on you. Quickly pack up. If you need anything, just tell me." The corners of Qin Yining's mouth twitched stiffly, and he forced a smile. "This subject understands Your Majesty's good intentions. Thank you for taking care of me these days. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to my two maidservants." The empress smiled. "To be honest, this consort is doing this for the sake of finding out the truth. It's not all for your sake. This subject is already fortunate that Your Majesty can handle things fairly." This sentence had the suspicion of accusing Li Qitian of being unfair in his handling of matters. But Qin Yining was speaking the truth. When the empress was faced with Qin Yining, she even felt that her own husband had done such a dirty thing. She even felt embarrassed for him. However, she could only think about this in her heart. Qin Yining only said it because he trusted her. After bidding farewell to the empress, Qin Yining immediately asked Ji Yun and Bing Tang to take the packages that he had already packed and asked a palace servant to lead the way out of the palace. She had lived in the palace for more than 2 months. From the beginning of spring to the beginning of summer, she had experienced so much. Her own suffering was nothing. What she couldn't accept the most was that Qin Huayuan had died. Whenever he thought of this, Qin Yining's tears couldn't help but fall. However, he couldn't cry casually in the palace, so as not to bring bad luck to the nobles. When they finally got out of the palace, the carriage at home had been waiting for a long time. The person who came to pick her up was a familiar manservant. He was wearing a simple gray robe and a white mourning belt around his waist. When he saw Qin Yining, he bowed. "Wang Fei, this one is here to take you back to the Fu." The white belt around the manservant's waist was too dazzling. Qin Yining closed his eyes. His dry and swollen eyes couldn't help but burst into tears again. The three of them got on the carriage. The manservant waved his whip and drove the carriage quickly. When they arrived at the Fu's gate, Qin Yining lifted the curtain to take a look. He was blinded by the white light. After getting off the carriage, he rushed into the Fu without a care. Along the way, there were white banners hanging everywhere. All the servants he saw were wearing mourning clothes. Chapter 807. When Qin Yining saw the mess in the Fu, her heart felt like it was being squeezed tightly by a large hand. She was finally out of the palace. She didn't have to care about the rules anymore. She could cry whenever she wanted. She didn't have to worry about whether the masters in the palace would be angry. "Father." She thought that her voice was very loud when she called out, "Father," but in reality, her throat didn't make any sound. There was only a faint gasp. On the way from the imperial palace to the Wangfu, her throat was so swollen that she couldn't speak. "Sister Yi, you're finally back." Seeing Qin Yining come back, second master and third master quickly went forward to greet her. "Second uncle, third uncle." Qin Yining looked at her relatives. Her eyes were full of grief, almost drowning the people around her. She didn't shout herself hoarse, nor did she beat her chest and stamp her feet before fainting like old madam. She only cried silently, but it was as if she had pulled everyone into a whirlpool of grief. Second old master and third old master could not help but shed tears. Qin Han and Qin, you were already dressed in mourning clothes. They ordered a servant to bring a white linen robe. Bing Tang and Ji Yun helped Qin Yining put it on. She stood there in a daze, allowing the servant girls to fiddle with her. Her red and swollen eyes looked around. The servant girls and manservants were busy setting up the mourning banner and the mourning shed. Everyone was doing their own things, but no one made a sound. Qin Han looked at Qin Yining's skinny body. Her face was pale with a hint of green. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her lips were pale. He couldn't help but pat her shoulder with heartache. Fourth sister, don't be like this. If you hurt your body from crying, eldest uncle will be distressed. You have to cherish yourself. It's me who is unfilial. Qin Yining smiled miserably. She was the one who had implicated Qin Huaiyuan. If she hadn't married Pang Xiao, Qin Huaiyuan wouldn't have gotten into trouble this time. However, no one had the ability to predict the future. When she married Pang Xiao, although she expected that she would be involved in the struggle of the imperial court and that she might not be able to live a peaceful life, she did not expect that she would implicate her family. Nonsense, Second Master said in a nasal voice. You've already done very well. Your father has already passed away, but there are still so many people in the family. The court is still counting on you and Wang Yi to control the situation. Wang Yi is not at home, so you have to pull yourself together, understand? Qin Yining nodded slowly. I know all of this. It was just that his heart felt terrible. If it wasn't for me, father wouldn't have died. Qin Yining clutched his lapels. He felt as if a piece of his heart was missing. Some things, once lost, could never be found again. Silly child. How can I blame you for this? Third Master sighed. You are a good child. Don't blame yourself for this kind of thing. This is fate. You can't be blamed. Qin Yining closed his eyes and forcefully pulled back his chaotic thoughts. When he looked at her again, his eyes were as bright as a sharp blade that had been unsheathed under the moonlight. Second uncle. Third uncle, have you sent a letter to the south? Second Master sighed. Not yet. Sister E, do you know what your Majesty said in detail? What did he say? Second Master told Qin Yining everything that Xiong Jinshui said when he came here. It seems that your Majesty is still preparing to punish Big Brother for his crimes. Big Brother has already lost his life, but you still want to punish him for not doing his job well and not even giving him a posthumous name. Qin Yining's lips curled into a cold smile. Perhaps he's angry out of humiliation. Angry out of humiliation? Why? Qin Yining looked around and shook his head in the end. Let's set up the mourning hall first. I think we'll keep the coffin for the 49th day and wait for your Majesty's instructions. Whether it's a reward or a punishment, I'll accept it. Seeing that Qin Yining was discussing the setting up of the mourning hall, Yao Qinggu, who was standing not too far away, walked over with his arms crossed. The Qin clan. Qin Yining turned around and saw Yao Qinggu. He bowed and greeted, esteemed master. Amen. Your mother-in-law has gone to the inner residence to see your grandmother. Your grandmother's health has deteriorated once she hears the news. You should quickly go and take a look as well. Qin Yining nodded and said, yes, granddaughter-in-law understands. Yao Qinggu nodded and didn't say anything else. Qin Yining said goodbye to second grandpa and third grandpa, then went to the back first. Unexpectedly, when he arrived at the Dowager Matriarch's courtyard, he saw the Yao clan coming out from inside and wiping the corners of their eyes with a light blue handkerchief. Qin Yining stood still and bowed respectfully. Old madam. Oh, you're back. What happened to your throat? It's nothing serious. Yao clan sighed and held Qin Yining's hand with both hands as they walked to a corner. I know you're upset that something like this happened to your family. Look at how thin you are. TSK, TSK, TSK. You should also take care of your body. After all, you're the mother of 2 children. Although they were persuading, Qin Yining didn't feel comforted at all. Instead, she felt that the Yao clan was reminding her that she was not only the daughter of the family Qin, but also the daughter-in-law of the Pang family. Qin Yining was agitated and didn't have his usual patience. However, he still suppressed his temper and said respectfully, yes, daughter-in-law understands. Amen. Yao clan felt much better when they saw Qin Yining being so respectful. They thought about the chaotic situation in the residence and said, Qin clan, you're the daughter-in-law of the Pang family. Although our prince's residence has taken in a large portion of your maternal family, it's still very unfortunate. Now that something has happened, it's inauspicious. Isn't it inappropriate to set up a mourning shed in front of the residence? Qin Yining suddenly raised his head and looked at Yao Clan with cold eyes. "Oh, madam, what do you mean?" Yao Clan almost couldn't help but look away when Qin Yining looked at him with such eyes. However, on second thought, this was the prince's residence, and her son was Wang Yi. It was fine that her son had taken in the Yu family for a period of time. However, why did the family Qin think that she was the master of the prince's residence? What kind of rule was this to hold a funeral in her residence? Yao Clan felt much more confident when they thought of this. "Qin Clan, you're a smart child. Don't you understand what I mean? This is the prince's residence. After all, it's not your family, Qin. Everyone is very sad that something has happened to your father. I'm also very sorry. However, it's not appropriate to set up your father's mourning hall in the prince's residence, right? You have to understand. I'm also a mother. My son is guarding the south, and I don't know how he's doing. I'm also afraid that the bad luck will affect my son. You're also a mother, so you should be able to understand." Qin Yining smiled. "I understand what you mean, old madam. In your eyes, I'm always a member of the family Qin. I'm an outsider. How can that be? Don't distort my meaning. You are you. Your family is your family. How can you compare the two of you? You're married to Dai Fu, so you're the daughter-in-law of the Pang family. This won't change. But you're not the daughter-in-law of the Pang family. What right do you have to make decisions for the Pang family?" Yao Clan's expression suddenly changed. She said quickly, "What did you say? Old madam, you're also a smart person. Don't you understand what I mean?" Qin Yining returned the Yao Clan's words to her word for word. He continued, "I want to make one point clear. The family Qin doesn't want to be taken in by the Wang family because they don't have a house. They also don't have nowhere to go. Why did Wang Yi and I discuss letting the two families live together before we went out? Has old madam forgotten? The situation in the imperial court is so tense. Wang Yi is afraid that something will happen suddenly, such as assassination, fire, or something like that. Or Wang Yi's enemies will suddenly come to the door. Only you and the old master stay in the mansion with a group of servants. He's afraid that you'll be eaten alive. That's why Wang Yi begged my father to stay and take charge. If it weren't for my father's outside inspection of the imperial court and shelter the family from the wind and rain, do you think you and the old master can eat melon seeds and drink tea in peace and gossip behind people's backs? You, whose rule is this? Strange Tao has said that you're a barbarian. I think you're simply presumptuous. You don't deserve to be my Pang family's daughter-in-law. It's not up to you to decide whether I deserve to be your daughter-in-law or not. I'll say it again. As long as you get a letter for Wang Yi and ask Wang Yi to give me a divorce letter, I'll leave immediately." Qin Yining's nerves had been stretched to the extreme and was on the verge of collapse. She used to calmly endure the Yao clan's unreasonable tantrums, but now she couldn't stand it anymore. "Ji Yun, this servant is here. Go find Master Zhong and tidy up the house I bought. Also, go ahead and tell my second uncle and third uncle that the family Qin will be moved out soon. There's no need to set up a mourning hall for the time being. It won't be too late to set it up in the new house." "Yes," Ji Yun responded loudly. Her sharp eyes pierced the Yao clan like knives as she turned and walked out. Bing Tang. Qin Yining was still looking at the Yao clan. "This servant is here." Bing Tang took a step forward. "Go and see how old madam is doing. See if she's fit to be moved. Come back to me later. This servant will go now." Bing Tang nodded and walked past the Yao clan into the inner residence. She muttered in a low voice, "Bah, they're relatives. I've never seen such a selfish person. The old lady is sick, but they still force her to leave." Yao clan suddenly turned around and glared at Bing Tang. "Come back. Who allowed you to gossip?" Bing Tang walked away quickly, completely ignoring the Yao clan. Yao clan angrily pointed at Qin Yining. "You vicious daughter-in-law. Is this how you treat your servants? You let them go against your mother-in-law." Qin Yining rubbed her swollen and painful temples. Xian Yun and Xiao Lu immediately went to support Qin Yining. Lian Xiaozhou even took out a small, flat porcelain box from her sleeve. She dug out a small lump of ointment and applied it on Qin Yining's temples. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Sister, let's go. Don't stay here and suffer." Qin Yining touched Lian Xiaozhou's face and turned to Xian Yun. "Tell the Jinghu Wei that Wang Yi left behind to come see me. Xian Yun immediately nodded and went to carry out the task. Not long after, 16 sturdy men dressed in all kinds of clothes and manservants gathered in front of Qin Yining, 4 of them in a row. 6 of them were Qin Yining's followers. The other 10 were left behind by Pang Xiao near the Wang mansion. Qin Yining pressed her forehead and pointed at the 6 men who followed her for a long time, saying, "Pack up and follow me later." "Yes." The 6 men answered in unison. Qin Yining turned to the 10 men and said, "The 10 of you stay in the mansion. After my family moves out, I suggest that you guard the surroundings of Chunhui Hall and divide the guards into several groups. I will send someone to tell you the location of your new home later. If you have any questions, you can come to me at any time." Chapter 808. Qin Yining straightened her back and said calmly, "Don't worry, I still have brothers from the Qingtian alliance under me. It won't be a problem to protect my family Qin. But you just need to relay my words to Wang Yi. Wang Yi won't blame you. In the future, your mission is to protect Patriarch Yao and Madame Yao." The 10 people hesitated for a moment, but could only nod in agreement. Qin Yining respectfully curtsied to the Yao clan. "Old madam, do you have any other instructions? If not, this daughter-in-law still remembers to visit the old madam of our residence." The Yao clan gritted their teeth. Qin Yining's words made it seem like she didn't understand human feelings and was delaying her from visiting her elders. The Yao clan harumphed fiercely and left in a huff. Qin Yining slowly straightened her body and rubbed her throbbing temples. She brought Xian Yun, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou to the old madam's room. Bing Tang had already treated the old madam and woke her up. The old madam was currently holding on to second madam's hand and sobbing. The womenfolk in the room were all crying. Qin Yining's cries were the most miserable. Although Qin Yining was an adopted daughter and Qin Huayuan had once sent her to a farmstead, there was still a father-daughter relationship. Now that he was gone, Qin Yining could only think of the good elders. She truly regretted not getting along with her father in the past. Qin Yining's eyes were hot. She sat beside the old madam and held her hand, saying, "Old madam, you have to take care of your body. Don't be sad." The old madam closed her eyes and opened her mouth wide as she wailed, "My brother Meng, my son, this is taking my life. I'm already so old. What I need to take care of myself. If the heavens open their eyes, please take my life and return my son. Return him." Qin Yining closed her eyes, and a string of hot tears flowed down from the corners of her dry eyes. It stung her eyes and eyelids, and she was in so much pain that she could barely open her eyes. "Old madam, don't be sad. Our family has experienced all kinds of trials and tribulations. How can there be a hurdle that we can't overcome? Moreover, according to the emperor's message, there was no corpse left. Maybe my father was just taken away. Maybe he's not dead." Everyone looked at Qin Yining. Qin Yining wiped his tears and said, "No matter what, we have to be strong. We can't let our loved ones suffer while our enemies are happy, can we?" Madame Dowager gripped Qin Yining's hand tightly, as if she wanted to break her wrist. "Your father might not be dead. He might still be alive. It's possible. As long as I don't see his corpse for a day, I won't believe that he's gone just like that." Although Qin Yining said this, only he knew that he was only trying to appease the old madam. Sometimes the old madam was a little selfish, but her love for her father was sincere. He was afraid that the old madam wouldn't be able to overcome this hurdle. Giving the old madam some hope and giving her time to accept reality was better than losing her life. Qin Yining stretched out his arms and hugged the old madam. "Old madam, don't worry and don't be afraid. Your granddaughter will be filial to you. Our family will be filial to you. Our family has experienced so many storms and waves, but didn't we overcome them all in the end? Now let's pack up first. I bought a house outside, and we'll go back to our own home first." When they heard Qin Yining suddenly say that they were going to move at this critical juncture, everyone was a little puzzled. However, when they saw Qin Yining's haggard and weak appearance, and remembered that this was the prince's Fu and that their family had interacted with the Yao clan before, they guessed that something was amiss. They tacitly didn't ask further. Second Madam sniffled and said, "Sister E, you're the one who paid for the house this time. After our family was robbed, we didn't have enough money to buy a house in the capital." Second Aunt really feels apologetic. Second Aunt, you're being too formal with your words. We're family. There's no need to be so calculative. Qin Ening stood up and smiled comfortingly at everyone. Everyone, pack up. Let's move over as soon as possible. It was also good to set up a morning hall. Everyone put away their sorrow and went back to their rooms to pack up. Wang Fei, Master Zhong is here. Ji Yin ran over to report, panting. Qin Ening nodded and led the servant girls to the front yard. Master Zhong was wearing a dark blue wide-sleeved outer robe and was quietly wiping away tears. When he saw Qin Ening, he hurriedly adjusted his expression and bowed. Wang Fei, I've already prepared the house and arranged for people to look after it. Are we moving now? We're moving now. Master Zhong, thank you very much. Qin Ening's voice was even more unclear than before. It was basically a gasp. When he heard Qin Ening speak like this, Master Zhong felt even worse. He sighed heavily. What's going on? Qin Ening smiled bitterly and shook his head. He said, how many brothers of the Qin Tian alliance are there left in the city? I want to ask some of them to come to our new home and help. Master Zhong said, I heard the news you sent out from the palace. Liao Zhibing took the Zhao brothers and traveled day and night to the north. I'm not sure how many brothers are left behind, but I know how to contact them. I'll find some people to come see you later. Qin Ening nodded and said, it's been hard on you. At this juncture, I'm actually already worried about you. It's all thanks to you. Hey, don't say that. Who wouldn't be worried when such a big thing happened to their family? Wang Fei, you've already done very well. This old man's family's lives were saved thanks to you. I'm just running errands and doing odd jobs for you. I still feel like I can't repay your kindness. Please don't be so courteous with me. Qin Ening's eyes were hot, and his nose was sour. Tears almost fell from his eyes. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Although some people were her family, they weren't even willing to give her a place to stop her coffin at the crucial moment, saying that they would be tainted with bad luck. Although some people were outsiders, they treated her with sincerity. They weren't afraid of getting into trouble and still did their best to help her. While he was talking to Master Zhong, Second Master and Third Master had already brought the men of the family Qin to hire a carriage to move. When Ji Yin came out to reply, although she didn't explain the reason in detail, she only said that Qin Ening had met with the Yao clan. They could already guess a thing or two. Although Second Master wasn't as outstanding as Qin Huaiyuan, he was still an official for many years. Third Master was an expert in business and definitely had enough brains. Even if Qin Ening didn't complain to them, they could guess that the Yao clan must have said something to Yao Chenggu. The family Qin didn't have nowhere else to go, so why stay here and not leave? None of them complained, and none of them blamed Qin Ening. When they heard the news, they silently ordered people to pack up. When they saw Qin Ening let Master Zhong choose a place to stay, they didn't have the slightest bit of resentment towards Qin Ening. Qin Huan was already gone, so the rest of the family shouldn't be suspicious of each other. They should stick together. With the servants of the prince's residence following orders, the family Qin's luggage was packed very quickly. Not long after, dozens of carriages were packed outside the side gate. Master Zhong ordered people to lead the carriages carrying the luggage to leave first, while he stayed by Qin Ening's side to listen to his orders. After everything was arranged properly, before they set off, Second Master said, Sister E, you go serve your grandmother and the others in the carriage. Your third uncle and I will go bid farewell to old Master Yao. Qin Ening opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Third Master said, After all, we've lived here for so long. It would be rude if we don't bid farewell before leaving. Qin Ening thought about it and said, Then I'll go with you too. There's no need. You go accompany your grandmother. Second Master and Third Master made up their minds to not let Qin Ening be bullied again. The two brothers brought their manservants and went to Chunwei Hall to pay a visit. Yao Chenggu was drinking tea and eating snacks when he heard a maidservant report that the two masters of the family Qin had arrived. He hurriedly patted the crumbs off his hands and said, "Please come in." Then he went to the main hall of Chunwei Hall. Not long after, the two came in side by side and saluted. "Old Master Yao, our family will be moving out. Thank you for taking care of us these past few days." "Don't mention it, don't mention it. We're all one family, so there's no need to be so polite. In my opinion, there's no need for you to move out. Wouldn't it be more lively if you stayed and lived together? Your Majesty has bestowed such a large residence. If you accompany us, wouldn't it be more spacious?" Third Master suppressed his anger. He had never seen such a shameless person. He immediately smiled in surprise and said, "Old Master Yao's words make sense. Second brother, why don't we not move out?" Yao Chengu's breathing stopped and the smile on his face froze. Second Master's face was stern as he said in a deep voice, "Nonsense. Everything has been prepared. If we don't move out now, wouldn't we have to come back again? Moreover, our family is going to hold a funeral. Don't let other families violate the taboo." "Other families?" Third Master's face was full of doubt. "This is Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Other than Wang Yi, the one in charge is Wang Fei. Who has the right to say something like violating the taboo?" Yao Chengu's face was already dark as he said with a heavy expression, "What do the two of you mean by this?" Second Master knocked on Third Master's forehead. "Who told you to speak the truth?" Then he cupped his hands to Yao Chengu and said politely, "Please sit for a moment. We will take our leave. Today, we will bid farewell to you. Later, we will also send a letter to Wang Yi to express our gratitude to Wang Yi." Third Master also nodded and cupped his hands. "Say, let's part here. If there is anything else, it is the same to contact Wang Yi through a letter." Second Master and Third Master nodded and left one after the other. Yao Chengu's face was as dark as water. Thinking of Pang Zhao's love for Qin Yining, he felt that it would not be good to tell Pang Xiao about this matter. However, the family Qin had moved out. If Pang Xiao asked the reason, he did not know how to answer. No matter how anxious and conflicted Yao Chengu was, the family Qin still moved out of the prince's residence at this time and arrived in front of a large courtyard house in Ping Lane. At this time, the servants had already set up a mourning hall in the main hall. The coffin was also prepared, but there was nothing placed inside. The memorial tablet of Qin Huayuan was placed on the offering table. Below it were offerings and an incense burner. Chapter 809. That's already very good. Thank you for being so thoughtful. Qin Yining looked gratefully at Master Zhong. Her pair of clear almond eyes made one feel her sincerity. Although Qin Yining was the master, Master Zhong regarded her as a junior who deserved to be doted on. Master Zhong had already cried behind her back when such a big thing happened to the family Qin. He beat his chest and stomped his feet, hating himself for not being able to help. At this moment, he felt even more heartache for his master. He hurriedly bowed respectfully and said, "Don't say that. It's good that I can help. This old man doesn't have much ability. If Princess Consort needs anything, please feel free to ask." As the family Qin members walked into the Fu, they couldn't help but feel moved when they heard Master Zhong's words. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Third Old Master and Second Old Master thanked Master Zhong again. The group entered the Fu through the side door. At this time, Qin Yining didn't have the extra energy to care about the matters in the inner residence. Fortunately, Second Old Master was steady. When she saw that Qin Yining was extremely thin and weak, her face was deathly pale, and she couldn't even speak. She pitied her for losing her father at such a young age. Thus, she shouldered all the matters in the inner residence. She settled down the family members, served the old madam, and managed the internal affairs and the servants. She didn't bother Qin Yining at all. Qin Yining, Second Old Master, Third Old Master, and the servants arranged the mourning hall together. Master Zhong ordered someone to deliver a letter to the Qingtian Alliance's hall leader, Qiao Shangfei, who stayed in the capital. Qiao Shangfei was a two-time grand scholar in the Dian imperial court. Although he was weak in literature, he was extremely intelligent and had a high reputation in the alliance. When he heard that the family Qin was in trouble, he immediately rushed over with more than 10 people. Qin Yining propped up her tired body to meet them. Alliance head, please tell me if you have any instructions. Qiao Shangfei said sincerely, then added, you don't look well. Since the incident has already happened, you must restrain your grief. What's important is your health. Thank you, whole leader Qiao. I'll pay more attention. Qin Yining said, we didn't make any preparations when we moved here. We still need to ask Hall Master Qiao and his brothers for help. After all, there are so many people in the residence. We still need to consider our safety. Don't worry, Alliance Master. Just leave it to us. The Alliance members had long decided to follow Qin Yining. Back then, the Green Sky Alliance had contributed to the coup, and even Your Majesty had acknowledged their existence. It was only because of Qin Yining's decision that they were able to get rid of the label of being a rebel. Furthermore, they were all loyal men, so they wouldn't reject this offer. Qin Yining thanked him gratefully and asked his men to arrange accommodations for the members of the Green Sky Alliance. Second Old Master went to the inner residence to find Qin Huayuan's usual clothes and spread them at the bottom of the coffin. The memorial tablet was also erected as quickly as possible. Incense and candles were lit, and fruits were placed on the table. Qin Yining wore mourning clothes and knelt in front of the coffin to light the first incense stick. Father, have you really passed away? She closed her eyes, and tears streamed down her face. Behind her, the maidservants were also sobbing and sobbing. They burned joss paper into a basin, and the air was filled with the smell of burning joss paper. The ashes of the paper swirled and danced in the air. The family Qin quickly settled down and set up a mourning hall. In the prince's residence, the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu set up the table and cooked a few of their favorite dishes. They ate a big meal to celebrate, and the prince's residence regained its tranquility. Jinghu Wei, who had been left behind by Qin Yining, explained the situation in detail and sent a messenger pigeon to the south. At the same time, Qin Yining also sent someone to find the messenger and gave him money to speed up the delivery. The messenger hurriedly rushed to Nan Yan's grandmother's home to report the death of the Sun clan. However, the speed of a messenger pigeon was still much faster than the speed of foot. After Pang Xiao received the letter, she didn't say anything for a long time after reading the contents of the note. Huzi stood to the side. He could tell from his expression that Wang Yi was in a very bad mood right now. Although Pang Xiao wasn't in the capital, he had arranged spies in the capital. Qin Yining's thrilling experience in the palace had made him break out in a cold sweat. Now that she was finally out of danger, he didn't even have time to breathe a sigh of relief before something happened to Qin Huayan. Pang Xiao knew that Qin Yining had suffered in his boudoir, so she naturally knew how important Qin Huayuan was to Qin Yining. Suddenly losing her father was already a big blow to Qin Yining. Who would have thought that her family would be forced out of the prince's residence? Pang Xiao clenched her fists tightly. He knew the personalities of the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu. They were smart and selfish, but he didn't think that they would do such a shameless thing. They just said that it was bad luck. They didn't care whether his wife was sad or not. Forcing someone to leave in this kind of situation, was that something humans would do? No wonder, sister, he hasn't been writing to me recently. Pang Xiao lowered her head and frowned. She read the words on the note again. Then, suppressing her anger, she threw the note into the brazier and burned it. His relatives had made things difficult for his wife time and time again when he didn't know. His wife didn't complain to him. Could he take her sensibility as a matter of course with a clear conscience? Pang Xiao returned to the table and wrote a concise letter in one go. This letter was sent to the Yao clan as quickly as possible. After opening the letter, the Yao clan was stunned. They slammed the table and scolded. Is this the son I raised? Was he bewitched by the Qin clan? Now he's thinking of outsiders. I raised him for so long. Did it all go to waste? Yao Qinggu took the letter and read it carefully. The letter didn't blame them for it. It only said, marriage is for the sake of marriage, but you turned them into enemies. By doing this, Aren't you afraid that Pang Zhishi will be sandwiched in the middle? There should be a limit to selfishness. After all, the family Qin has protected them so many times. Yao Qinggu felt uncomfortable and angry for a while. However, he was angry because the consequences of his little thoughts were exposed. His face was burning with embarrassment and embarrassment. The Yao clan was already lying on the table and crying. I gave birth to an ingrate. What's the use of having a son like him? He only thinks about his wife. After marrying a wife, he forgot about his mother. Wasn't I driving the family Qin away because of him? If I wasn't afraid of tarnishing his mansion with bad luck, I wouldn't have become such a bad person. This little bastard just doesn't know how to save trouble. He doesn't know how to be grateful. He doesn't know how to reprimand his wife to vent my anger. Instead, he's blaming me. How many generations of bad luck did I have to have such a hard life? The Yao clan was sobbing and cursing. Yao Qinggu was annoyed. Yao Qinggu's eyes fell on the letter. It said that the family Qin had protected them so many times. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. It seems that Dai Fu and his father-in-law made some kind of agreement. When Dai Fu was away, his father-in-law helped us a lot. The Yao clan raised her head. Her face was wet from crying. Father, what did you say? Yao Qinggu said, that's not important. I'm afraid that we've overreached ourselves this time and made Dai Fu unhappy. In fact, we didn't do anything wrong, but I'm afraid that people outside will gossip about us. When that time comes, won't we be in a difficult position? Then what should we do? The Yao clan wiped her face. You were the one who suggested this first. That's why I did it. You must help me think of a way. Yao Qinggu rolled his eyes at the Yao clan and said, sooner or later, I won't care about you. Tomorrow, we'll find out where the Qin clan moved to. Tomorrow, we'll go burn incense for them. Then, we'll go help them. Their family is gone, so there will be people coming to pay their respects. We'll casually mention the reason why they moved in front of the mourners. We'll just say that the Qin clan wanted to move. Then, there won't be any big problems. That's the only way. The Yao clan nodded. She thought of the words Pang Xiao said in the letter. Although it couldn't be said to be a reprimand, it expressed his dissatisfaction with her. There was also a hint of decisiveness. This made the Yao clan panic and cry again. In fact, Yao Qinggu's plan to talk about this matter in front of the mourners was going to fail. Because of Li Qitian's silence, no one came to pay their respects after the Qin Huayuan's coffin was set up. Even those who were on good terms with the Qin Huayuan didn't reply when they sent the obituary there. These days, the Qin residence was completely deserted. Only their own family members were guarding the entrance. The Qin Yining's throat was much better these days. At this moment, he was discussing with his second and third uncles in the courtyard in a low voice. It's necessary to stop the coffin for 49 days. It's just that it's been so many days, yet no one has come to pay their respects. Only a few peddlers who have received favors from our family dare to kowtow from a distance outside the door. Your Majesty, what do you mean by this? Could it be that Big Brother died in vain? Keep your voice down. Second Master scolded Third Master in a low voice. Don't speak without a filter. You don't even know the trouble you've caused. Our family is already in such a mess. We can't afford any more twists and turns. Third Master also realized that he had said something wrong. He sighed helplessly and said, I'm also angry. Big Brother was a very good person all his life, but now he has to end up like this. Glancing at Qin Yining, she didn't continue her words in the end. Qin Yining didn't pay attention to Third Master's words. She was analyzing Li Qitian's thoughts. Li Qitian didn't make a public statement. Everyone in the imperial court knew that Qin Huayuan was afraid of angering the heavens. People who understood the situation didn't dare to get close to the family Qin. This was practically a falling out with the family Qin. It seemed that Li Qitian was very confident in himself after the assessment in the north. No matter what, we still have to do what we need to do. We can't delay the mourning hall for one day because of other reasons. Also, I have a proposal that I want to discuss with second uncle and third uncle. Sister E, please speak. Second Master and Third Master looked at Qin Yining seriously. Qin Yining thought for a moment. First, she told them about her encounter in the palace in a low voice. Then, She told them about her conjecture about Qin Huaiyuan. Second master and third master were already tongue-tied. For a long time, they couldn't say a single word. They were originally disappointed with Li Qitian's behavior, but now they felt their hearts turn cold. So you're saying that your majesty has made up his mind to deal with the son-in-law? Third master swallowed and said with a hoarse voice, "Our family has been dragged into the whirlpool of conflict again." Chapter 8:10. The three of them all had grave expressions and didn't know what to say for a moment. After a long time, third master finally said in a hoarse voice, "Sister E, is your information accurate? Is your guess reliable?" Qin Yining said solemnly, "The truth is already in front of us." "I understand." Second master sighed deeply. "Since something like this happened to our family, we must escort eldest brother's coffin back to his hometown. I will discuss this matter with the higher-ups. When the time comes, our family will think of a way to return to our hometown. I was going to discuss this matter with second uncle and third uncle." Qin Yining nodded and said, "In the past, when we were involved in this kind of trouble, we wanted to escape. However, your majesty's eyes were always on our family, so we didn't have a suitable reason to leave the capital. Now that we're taking advantage of this opportunity, our departure will be justified. His Majesty won't be able to stop us from leaving in front of everyone. That's right. When we go to the south, our family will live in seclusion and won't care about the matters of the imperial court." Second master shook his head dispiritedly. "The fame and fortune of the imperial court are all ephemeral. If the person is gone, then there's nothing left. In the past, I still had the heart to climb up the ranks, but now I don't care about anything. If we can live together peacefully as a family, it's enough to make people satisfied." Qin Yining nodded and said, "Second uncle is right. Our family has enjoyed great riches and experienced great dangers. In the future, I only want our family to live a peaceful life. I'd rather be a landlord than float in the imperial court." Second master and third master both nodded in agreement. At this time, a young maidservant suddenly ran in from outside the courtyard. "Princess consort, outside." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a dusty figure flipping over the wall. Everyone turned around to look and couldn't help but be shocked. The person who came had an exquisite figure, but her face was covered in dust. It was impossible to see her face. Her hair was messy and scattered, and her clothes were covered in a layer of dust. It was almost impossible to see her original color. After carefully looking, Qin Yining murmured, "Aunt Chow." Chow Yuqing stood in front of the coffin and stared blankly at the memorial tablet. Two streams of hot tears rolled down her cheeks, leaving two white streaks under her eyes. "Qi Ming." A hoarse and heart-wrenching sob came out of her throat. Chow Yuqing was no longer as nimble as she had been when she jumped over the wall. Her mournful voice was hoarse, and everyone who heard it was moved by it. Second master and third master were silent. They couldn't help but be moved. Qin Yining went forward and put his arm around Chow Yuqing's shoulder. "Aunt Chow, don't be like this. My father won't be at ease." Chow Yuqing gently pushed Qin Yining away. She slowly turned her head to look at him. There was no emotion in her dark eyes. She was like a puppet that had lost its soul. "He's not here anymore. Why should I care if he's at ease? When he was alive, I had to consider his feelings. I didn't want to put him in a difficult position. Now that he's dead, do I still have to worry about his feelings? Then what am I to him?" Qin Yining knew about Chow Yuqing's intentions when she followed Qin Huaiyuan to protect him before the fall of Dian. There was a famine in the city. Looking at Chow Yuqing's appearance, it was obvious that she had rushed back as soon as she received the news. Otherwise, why would such a beautiful woman like her make herself look like this? Chow Yuqing's deep affection for Qin Huaiyuan moved her as the biological daughter of the Sun clan. Ever since Qin Huaiyuan had clearly expressed his rejection, Chow Yuqing had willingly become his bodyguard. Not only did she not do anything to harm them, but she would also step forward to protect the Sun clan. She protected her family Qin. She risked her life for them. She even risked her own safety several times to save Chao Yuqing's life. All because Chao Yuqing was the daughter of the man she loved. Chao Yuqing had always given her all. She would never receive the same amount of love in return. However, she still gave her all for the man she loved. What she wanted was nothing more than to be able to obtain some information about that person, so that she could quietly reminisce about it in the dead of the night. However, the harsh reality had deprived him of this. Qin Yining's tears fell like rain. He hugged Chao Yuqing and sobbed as he consoled her. However, Chao Yuqing remained in a daze. She stared at the name on the memorial tablet. A fire seemed to be burning in her pitch-black eyes. Second Old Master and Third Old Master recalled all the good things Qin Huaiyuan had done for them. They could not help but cover their faces and cry again. The entire courtyard was enveloped in a sorrowful atmosphere. At this moment, Qiao Shangfei suddenly walked in quickly. He nodded at Second Old Master and Third Old Master who were looking up at him. He walked straight to Qin Yining's side and said in a low voice, "Alliance Head, there's a group of people outside. The person in the lead is around 40 years old. He seems to be an official. He's brought over 30 bodyguards with him. Everyone is carrying weapons, and they're aggressively blocking the entrance. Our men have to guard all the entrances and exits of the residence. We don't have enough men at the entrance. What do you think we should do?" Qin Yining's expression instantly turned serious. "Did you see clearly that the person in the lead is an official?" "Most likely." Xiao Shangfei became nervous when he saw Qin Yining's expression change. Qin Yining laughed coldly. So many days had passed. None of his former colleagues from Qin Huaiyuan had dared to come and offer their condolences. Now, however, an official had come. He even brought a group of bodyguards with him. This was interesting. It was hard to tell if this person had come on his own accord or had been instructed by someone else. "Let's go and take a look." "Alliance Head, I think it's better if you tell me." "I'll go. After all, it's not safe outside. I don't know what these people are thinking. What if they hurt you?" Qin Yining shook his head. "If it's a disaster, we can't avoid it. We'll know when we see it." Second Old Master and Third Old Master became worried. After they came forward to ask about the situation, they went to the entrance with Qin Yining. Unexpectedly, before the group of them could go around the screen wall, they heard a deafening curse coming from outside the courtyard. "Qin Meng, you're an ignorant old man who betrays his country for glory. You gave your majesty's army provisions directly to the Tatars. Why didn't you die earlier?" Family Qin people are really shameless. Such traitors have a nerve to set up a mourning hall. If you ask me, we should rush in and smash that traitor's mourning hall to vent our anger. That's right, smash that traitor's mourning hall. The shouting outside became more and more intense. Qin Yining, Second Old Master, Third Old Master, and the others all had ashen expressions. Qin Yining's long eyebrows shot up. He gritted his teeth and said, "Open the door." "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.